Li Cheng decided to teach those selfish, hypocritical, and shameless guys a lesson. Zhonghai said, "Master 8, who do you think you are? Yi is your father." Li Cheng said. "Director Yang. Li Cheng is already an engineer now, how could you say that?" Chapter 2. The Cruel Hand, Silly Pillar captured by Director Yang on the spot. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Li Cheng traveled to the world of courtyards filled with love and bought a chicken to heal his sick mother, but was stolen by thieves in the yard. Subsequently, the police intervened in the investigation, and Zhonghai attempted to handle it internally, but was refuted by Li Cheng. Qin Huairu and Jia Zhang felt uneasy in their hearts. Huaihua told everyone that the chicken thief was her brother. Qin Huairu and Jia Zhang tried to cover up the truth, but Officer Cheng confirmed the true culprit. Zhonghai and others wanted to solve the problem by losing money, but Li Cheng insisted on handling it in accordance with the law. Silly Zhu tried to take the blame, while Zhonghai and the deaf old lady tried to obstruct the police from taking Silly Zhu, while Li Cheng helped the police push the deaf old lady away and firmly supported the law. Later, Silly Zhu admitted that he did not steal the chicken, but rather that Bang Gung stole the chicken from Li Cheng's family and was taken away by the police. In anger, Jia Zhang hit the foolish pillar and accused Qin Huairu. Zhonghai and the deaf old lady came forward to mediate. Li Cheng returned home and found that his mother's condition had improved. He was determined to take a tough stance on those who bullied them. At the conference, Zhonghai requested Li Cheng to write a letter of understanding to let go of the stick meme, but was rejected by Li Cheng. And threatened to imprison Bang Ji in the juvenile detention center. Silly Zhu wanted to stop Li Cheng, but was thrown more than 10 meters away by Li Cheng. After the quadrangle assembly, Li Cheng received rewards for his skills as a sign in system engineer and the unlucky symbol. When he returned to work at the steel rolling mill, he encountered difficulties from Jia Zhang and used the unlucky symbol to solve the problem. Zhonghai deliberately made things difficult for Li Cheng and entrusted him with the task of developing Ma steel. Li Cheng accepted the challenge and successfully developed Ma steel within 2 days, which shocked everyone. This incident successfully caught the close attention of Director Yang. Zhonghai did not believe that Li Cheng could develop such a thing, but the testing report proved everything. Director Yang greatly appreciated Li Cheng and promoted him to a 3rd-level fitter. Zhonghai was exposed for preventing others from being promoted, and Director Yang was furious and decided to take measures. Zhonghai felt humiliated and left because he was forced to call him Li Cheng's father for gambling. Director Yang expressed disgust towards Zhonghai's behavior and emphasized that technical personnel should focus on technology. The news of Zhonghai being reprimanded by the factory director spread throughout the entire courtyard, causing everyone to discuss. Later, Qin Huai ran back to the courtyard with tears in his eyes, claiming that his mother-in-law had been stung by a wasp and couldn't speak in her throat. Li Cheng suggested using child urine for treatment. Silly Zhu contributed child urine to rescue Jia and Zhang, but it was unsuccessful and instead led to more severe symptoms. The doctor pointed out that the child urine provided by Silly Zhu had problems, leading to increased toxicity. Silly Zhu admits to getting angry, but denies any connection to Jia Zhang's condition. Li Zhenji developed Ma steel and received commendation from the steel rolling mill, with prizes including a bicycle and 10 pounds of pork. In the courtyard, his success aroused envy and jealousy from others, including Zhonghai, Silly Zhu, and Yan Fugue. They conspired against Li Cheng, attempting to obstruct his progress through moral kidnapping and small actions. The deaf old lady also participated and provided suggestions. Later, the residents of the courtyard learned about Jia Zhang's condition in the hospital, and she fell into a coma after drinking the child urine from Silly Pillar. Zhonghai, Sha Zhu, Yan Fugue and others rushed to the hospital and found that Jia Zhang's lower body was paralyzed, requiring payment of medical expenses. Qin Huairu had no money to pay, so Silly Zhu suggested that the entire courtyard hold a quadrangle conference to raise funds. Zhonghai was dissatisfied with Silly Zhu's interest in Qinhuairu, but still agreed to the fundraising. All the members of the hospital attended the meeting, and Su Dumao joked about how Silly Zhu's child urine caused Jia Zhang's paralysis, causing laughter. Zhonghai organized a donation activity and requested everyone to donate voluntarily. Li Qing only donated 1 cent when donating, which caused dissatisfaction and moral kidnapping from Zhonghai. At the same time, the incident of Jia Zhang's half-body paralyzed due to poisoning was also exposed, which sparked the anger and accusations of Qinhuairu. Li Qing showcased his master-level experience in calligraphy, obtained a nightmare talisman, and used it to prank Zhonghai. He wrote couplets for everyone for free in the courtyard, and the neighborhood committee commended Li Qing. Later, Li Qing was appointed as a neighborhood committee clerk and successfully dismissed Zhonghai from his position as an uncle. Li Qing's arrogant identity greatly changed the attitude of the people in the courtyard towards him, and he became a more arrogant presence than Mr. Yi. Jia Zhang was dissatisfied with the fact that the Li family had meat to eat. She held her husband's portrait and cried, which affected everyone's Chinese New Year. Li Qing angrily slapped Jia Zhang, causing a dispute. Silly Zhu called the police, while Li Qing accused Jia Zhang of practicing feudal superstition, and Jia Zhang faced the fate of being educated. After Jia Zhang was caught engaging in feudal superstition activities, Li Qing's work in the steel rolling mill gradually gained recognition. On the first day of work in the new year, after a series of assessments, Li Qing was successfully promoted to level 8 fitter, causing shock throughout the factory. Upon hearing the news, Silly Zhu couldn't believe it and ran to Zhonghai's workshop to confirm. Zhonghai confirmed the truth of the news, and Silly Zhu angrily smashed the table, jealous of Li Qing's achievements. Zhonghai was criticized by the entire factory for producing substandard products, and he felt ashamed and distressed, believing that this was related to Li Qing. He went to the hospital to check for sleep problems and encountered Su Damao, who came to check for fertility issues. Both of them harbored resentment towards Li Qingxin. Su Damao held the infertility test report and suspected that it was caused by being beaten by a foolish pillar. Li Qing designed for Su Damao to find an opportunity to let Silly Zhu hit him, in order to confirm that Silly Zhu was the culprit. Su Damao felt jealous when he heard that Qin Jingru was on a blind date with Silly Zhu. He took Qin Jingru to dinner and spoke ill of Silly Zhu. After hearing the news, Silly Zhu was angry and ran to the restaurant to beat up Su Damao. Li Qing has a clear understanding of what kind of personality Silly Zhu is. What he wants to take advantage of is the foolish pillar. As for Silly Zhu stealing from the public house, it must be an even worse crime. The next day, all the people went to work at the steel rolling mill as usual. The silly pillar here didn't sleep all night last night. He feels that he has been living a bit too much lately. I used to be like this all the time. Who dares to bully me? Now, everyone dares to step on their own head, right? And he believes that all of this is due to Li Qing's opposition. Li Qing, who killed 1,000 knives, let me see how I killed him. He said fiercely. At this moment, he is holding a knife and cooking in the kitchen. Although cooking makes him feel happy, the thought of Li Qing makes his heart very annoyed. At this moment, he suddenly had an idea. He knows that Li Qing eats in the cafeteria every noon. As a chef, I often don't know how to cook or go to the front desk. I only know how to cook behind the scenes. But he thought he would be nauseous today, nauseous about this Li Qing. At least in terms of food, I am still the boss. Even the factory director likes to eat his own food. So he called Ma Hua over. Wait a moment, you don't have to go to the window to have dinner. I'll go today. Ma Hua was stunned when he heard this. Master, why are you such a big chef going to the window to cook? Just leave this kind of thing to us. But Silly Zhu did wave his hand and said, don't talk so much nonsense, I'm just going to the front desk to get a meal today. seeing my master getting a little angry. Ma Hua immediately closed his mouth. And then he agreed with a smile, after all, in this kitchen, this foolish pillar is our own leader, and we don't need to disobey what the leader wants to do. Lu Lan next to her also felt that there was something suspicious about this matter. But he didn't delve into anything. Because at this moment, his mind was always thinking of Deputy Factory Director Li. My own lover. Since coming to work in this factory, I have been under the watchful eye of Deputy Factory Director Li. It didn't take long to develop into this romantic relationship. But this kind of relationship secretly made him tremble with fear. She always wants to walk from the shadows to the surface, but she can't find any excuses or suitable timing. Ding 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 ding. With the sound of the bell ringing after work. The workers in this workshop flocked to the cafeteria one after another. Li Cheng is no exception. He basically has no intention of going home at noon and usually eats in the cafeteria. Simply put, it is also efficient. At this moment, he walked to the cafeteria with these colleagues as usual. Then queue up there to eat. But suddenly he discovered a problem, which was that the person who cooked was not Ma Hua, but Silly Zhu. At this moment, Silly Zhu seemed to be looking around, hoping that he could see Li Cheng in the crowd. Not long after, I saw Li Cheng in the middle of another row of lines. This row was originally assigned by Lu Lan. I am Silly Zhu. I walked over and whispered a few words to him. The two of them switched to a different row. At this time, Li Cheng also naturally walked to the row of silly pillars. Li Cheng saw this scene clearly, knowing that this foolish pillar must be causing trouble today. And this is also what Li Cheng expected. If you don't cause trouble, how can I send you in? Not long ago, about 5 minutes passed. It's up to Li Cheng. Li Cheng looked at the silly pillar in front of him and handed over the meal ticket. Give me 2 liang of mantou, a portion of tofu, and another portion of potatoes. Silly Zhu held this meal ticket and looked around, but he didn't want to fight here. What's wrong with you, silly pillar? There are still so many people lining up behind us, and everyone needs to eat. What are you doing here, grinding and chattering what? But Silly Zhu's next behavior left everyone confused. I saw Silly Zhu tear up this meal ticket directly. Then he threw it out. And he said coldly, the meal ticket you just took was fake, so I ate it. Do you want to take out the real meal ticket for a meal? This scene confused everyone. Who has the courage to use fake meal tickets to make meals? They don't believe it at all. Li Cheng was also angry at this moment and said, Silly pillar, are you trying to cause trouble today? I saw Silly Zhu chuckling and saying, I'm a foodie. If I say your meal ticket is fake, it's fake. Hurry up and leave, don't affect others to cook. Due to Li Cheng's promotion to the 8th level, almost everyone in the steel rolling mill knew him, and they still had great faith in his character. Silly pillar, are you a bit excessive? Li Cheng is already an 8th level worker and his salary is so high. As for bringing a fake meal ticket to your place to eat. That's right, we don't believe that Li Cheng would come with such fake meal tickets. Seeing the support from the people behind him, Li Cheng was very moved in his heart. However, at this moment, Li Cheng's choice made everyone very refined. He said to the person behind him. Forget it, that's all for this matter. After saying these words, Li Cheng took the initiative to leave the team, not even having a meal. Seeing Li Cheng leave in a gloomy manner, Silly Zhu's heart was filled with joy. Whatever position you hold, you always have a place to eat, but eating is my responsibility. I'll see what you do. Others were also very surprised. But I didn't think much about it. After all, Li Chengdu didn't pursue anything, so there's no need for them to pursue it. And the foolish pillar here, after tearing apart Li Cheng's meal ticket, did not continue to score himself, but instead asked Ma Hua to replace him. Because he came today to discuss Li Cheng, and surprisingly, his goal has already been achieved, so there is no need to stay here for anything longer. At this moment, Silly Zhu's heart was very happy, thinking about what techniques to use. Chapter 2. Meal Tickets. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. With my identity as the head chef of the kitchen, Li Cheng is not much of a big deal. No, I'm his meal ticket, I dare not say a word. I dare not even fart. He happily returned to the kitchen. And Li Cheng, he didn't eat in the cafeteria, but instead returned to the courtyard and had a meal. My mother is still very puzzled about why her son suddenly came back. However, Li Qingduan didn't say much, he just said that he wanted to come back for lunch, and the cafeteria was a bit uncomfortable with it. Upon hearing these words, Yu Zuehua immediately felt particularly moved. Why don't you come back every day for lunch in the future? But Li Cheng shook his head and said, this is a bit of a delay, after all, there is still work to do. After finishing his meal, Li Cheng returned to the steel rolling mill and found Su Damao. Damao, you need to be careful on the road. I've heard that after you took this 5,000 yuan, Silly Zhu is very dissatisfied with you. It's very likely that he will beat you up behind your back. Upon hearing this, Su Damao immediately felt a chill in his back. Because I have had this kind of experience before. I was trapped in a sack by this foolish pillar and knocked unconscious. This experience is truly vivid in my memory. Moreover, the foolish pillar really doesn't know the severity of his actions, and it is very likely that he will make a mistake again. I am not his opponent. So what should we do? 5,000 yuan is indeed a lot, silly pillar will definitely take a hard hit. Obviously, Su Damao was a bit scared at this moment. Li Cheng frowned and said, if you want to solve this dilemma, you must send this foolish pillar in first. Su Damao was puzzled and clearly didn't understand, what does it mean? What does it mean to send him in? I mean to send him to the cell. Upon hearing this, Su Damao was very shocked. I never thought about it for him. Are you being too lenient? Li Cheng looked at him coldly. He's the one who takes your life, he's the one who beats you into infertility. Su Damao immediately woke up and said, how could this kind of thing be easily done? I've had it since I was young and couldn't be sent in by the bus, beating me every day. I've had enough. Do you remember every time Silly Zhu returned to our courtyard, he would bring 2 lunch boxes? Su Damao thought back for a moment and nodded, I remember, I don't know what was in his lunch box. Li Cheng sneered, what else is there in his lunch box that contains the public's food? When he goes back tonight, he will definitely pack it too and steal the public's things. As long as we catch him on the spot and catch the stolen goods, he won't be able to say anything. He'll have to be obediently taken to the cell. Upon hearing these words, Su Damao's eyes lit up. Yeah, stealing from the public house is serious and you'll be shot. If Silly Zhu really stole this thing, then we must send him to the cell. But it's a great opportunity. What should we do? Are we waiting for him right at the door? Li Cheng shook his head and said, that's not possible. If you're the only one who saw it, and you don't have much evidence to argue with, you should go directly to the leader, go to Director Yang, and report this matter. If you don't report it, you will be the one who gets hurt. Su Damao said without hesitation. Immediately, Su Damao patted his chest and promised, don't worry, I'm going now, and I want to report it with my real name. After saying this, Su Damao walked out of the screening room. Go straight to Director Yang's office. Li Cheng nodded with great satisfaction as he was in Director Yang's office. He was also very surprised. Are you saying you want to report Silly Zhu stealing from the government under your real name? Director Yang looked at Su Damao and questioned loudly. Su Damao nodded and said, yes, I'm reporting Silly Zhu. He's been stealing from the government for many years, and every time he goes back from the steel rolling mill, he brings 2 lunch boxes with him. The lunch boxes contain all the food from the government. Seeing Su Damao nodding so firmly, Director Yang also believed it. Seeking fresh flowers. When we're about to finish work, I'll call the security office and you, along with others, to wait for him at the kitchen door. If he really steals public property, I won't tolerate it. Su Dumao was very happy to hear about it. After Su Dumao leaves, Director Yang also squinted his eyes. Actually, it's already clear about the fact that Silly Zhu stole public food. This matter can be classified as stealing or not stealing. It depends on how they determine the nature. Because usually, Silly Zhu only takes some leftover food. Many people have already reported it. However, in the past, he didn't blame Silly Pillar or anything. After all, Silly Pillar's cooking skills were decent, and he also loved them very much. On the other hand, Zhonghai is also his background. After all, Zhonghai is a few level 8 technicians in the factory for maintenance, so he still needs to take care of the face of these old comrades. But this time is different from the past. Zhonghai has already set the sun on the western mountain. In fact, the reason why Director Yang decided to take down Silly Zhu was because he actually tore up Li Cheng's meal ticket at noon. He actually had someone reporting to him after this incident happened. After all, as a factory manager, everything must be clear and concise. If it's not clear, how to be a factory manager and manage these disobedient subordinates well? At this time, Li Cheng was a treasure in their steel rolling mill. How could he possibly give up this treasure for a foolish pillar, for an Zhonghai? In addition, the fact that the meal ticket torn by Silly Zhu is genuine can convict him of this matter. All of these combined. It was only then that Director Yang decided to send this foolish pillar in. About 10 minutes before leaving work. At this moment, Director Yang, along with Su Damao and some members of the security department, had already waited outside the kitchen door. Usually, this kitchen is closed and not open to anyone else. After all, food safety requires serious protection. At this time, Li Cheng also followed along, and in fact, Director Yang knew that Li Cheng was also involved. But basically everyone is tacit. And here, Silly Zhu is very happy all day. Master, why are you laughing all day today? What good news is there? Ma Hua asked with a smile. I'm just happy today. Li Cheng is nothing in front of me. While I was eating, I tore up his meal ticket. What can he do with me? He just walked away in a disheveled manner. He laughed heartily at this point. Alright, you don't have to work here anymore. Hurry up and get out. I'll lock the kitchen door. Silly Zhu looked at the time and, as usual, kicked out his disciples first. And the disciples also silently walked out. After all, this has always been a foolish operation. After the disciples leave, Silly Zhu took out 2 lunch boxes from his body. And muttered as he looked at the chicken on the table. I'm really happy today. Take some fresh chicken from the factory. It shouldn't be a big deal, no one saw it anyway. Thinking about it, he put the fresh chicken in his lunch box. It contains 2 full lunch boxes. And humming a song, he opened the kitchen door and walked out. After closing the lock, he strode out as usual. But before taking a few steps, suddenly Su Damao jumped out. Stopped in front of Silly Pillar. Okay, what's inside the lunch box? Did you steal something from the public? Silly Zhu was taken aback for a moment and began to panic. But when he looked left and right, he saw Su Damao alone. I immediately felt relieved. You have to take care of this, get out of here quickly, or I'll beat you up. Tell me if you stole this thing. Su Damao still didn't leave. Hee, what's wrong with me getting something from the cafeteria? Actually, I have to tell you, what I got today is the cafeteria chicken. No matter how much you drip me, no one will believe your words. Speaking of which. Suddenly, Su Damao burst into laughter. Then, Li Cheng and Director Yang appeared in Su Damao's life. Silly Zhu was stunned to see these people. I may suddenly appear here. You. He hasn't finished speaking yet. Director Yang shouted loudly, I didn't expect silly Zhu to have so much courage as to steal things from our public family. The security department arrested him for me. Not long after, a few people surrounded and controlled the foolish pillar. Then when I opened the lunch box, it was indeed fresh chicken. I know that mussels are very, very precious in this era. Basically, they only eat a little when the leader comes over. I didn't expect this foolish pillar to be bold and daring to steal such expensive things. Do you have anything else to say now? Director Yang looked at him coldly. At this moment, silly Zhu was completely bewildered and didn't even react. And this matter quickly spread. Chapter 3. Director Yang's angry strike at Zhonghai. What are you? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. At this moment, the entire steel rolling mill is discussing this matter, which is the incident where silly pillar was caught stealing public food. At this time, Zhonghai was doing well in the workshop. Suddenly, news came from someone. Have you heard that? It seems that silly Zhu has been arrested. The people in the workshop were stunned when they heard this. I can't believe it. Aren't you joking? Why was silly Zhu suddenly caught? Especially Zhonghai here. He asked loudly, don't be funny here, okay? Stupid Zhu did a good job, why did he get caught? But the person smiled and said. I know your relationship with silly Zhu is very good, but it is indeed a fact that silly Zhu has been arrested. If you don't believe it, you can go to our steel plant's warehouse and take a look. At this point, silly Zhu has already been locked in. Upon hearing this, Zhonghai remained silent. He ran towards the outside of the workshop. But as Zhonghai left, the others continued to ask curiously. Is this thing true? What am I deceiving you for? The messenger was particularly speechless. If you don't want to know, just go out and take a look. What exactly was he arrested for? It seems to be talking about stealing public food. As you know, he works as the head chef in the kitchen. It's really too easy for him to get some food. Everyone was also skeptical when they heard this. On this side, Zhonghai hurriedly ran to the side of the warehouse. At this time, there were already many people at the entrance of the warehouse, many of whom were members of the security team. More importantly, Director Yang, Cheng, and Su Damao stood at the door. He walked up with some confusion. I happened to see silly pillar, who was locked in the warehouse and shouting loudly through the window of the warehouse. Grandpa, you're here at the right time. Come and save me. I heard silly Zhu's mournful cry, 597. Zhonghai was completely bewildered. What's going on? How did silly Zhu get caught in the warehouse again? And at this time, Director Yang is also here, so he must have committed a very serious crime. That person just now didn't tell himself what crime he had committed. So he deliberately pretended to smile and walked over. Then he looked at Director Yang and asked, what exactly happened here? Why is silly pillar locked inside? Director Yang didn't speak here, and Su Damao next to him was the first to say, what happened? Silly Zhu openly stole things from the public house and was caught on the spot by us. We are now waiting for the police to come, are you not trying to plead? It was only when Zhonghai heard this that he realized what had happened. However, I am also very helpless in my heart. Su Damao is big or small? Did I talk to you? Zhonghai looked at Su Damao coldly. He felt that Su Damao was not yet qualified to treat him like this. What Su Damao said is true. Do you have anything to say when we saw silly Zhu stealing public chicken on the spot and were caught by us? Zhonghai is very ugly. Director Yang in front of me looks very angry. In fact, Zhonghai suddenly remembered that silly Zhu once said that Director Yang particularly likes to eat the food he makes. So he walked over and explained, Director Yang, the pillar is a bit immature. You can spare him this time, and he will do it. Isn't the cooking technique always very good? I heard you've always liked the dishes he makes, and if you're locked up, you won't be able to eat them. In Zhonghai's words, there is indeed a certain element of temptation. But at this moment, Director Yang was determined to send the foolish pillar in. Although I like to eat these dishes made by silly pillars, to be honest, he did indeed steal things from the public house. We witnessed this with our own eyes, and it's no use who came. At this moment, silly Zhu Yiri was eating and howling in the warehouse. Upon hearing this voice, Zhonghai felt a bit heartbroken, so he walked up to Director Yang and continued, "That director, you see, since we have no credit for hard work, let's just forget about this matter. For the sake of my face, after all, I have also contributed so much to our factory." As soon as the words finished, Director Yang laughed. "Do you mean to say that? I know this silly pillar has always had a very good relationship with you, and the same goes for him in the courtyard. You can shelter him in the courtyard, but you cannot shelter him in this steel rolling mill. Everything I do is for the healthy development of our factory, and he has already violated the law and must be dealt with in this form of law." Zhonghai, what kind of face are you? Yang Cheng shouted loudly. "Give Zhonghai a jump." Director Yang never expected that Zhonghai would say such a thing. Doesn't he know that stealing public food, or even the most serious, could lead to direct execution? It's obvious that he doesn't even know. Or to put it another way, Zhonghai's always intelligent brain had already smelled it. In fact, Cheng beside him could understand his feelings. After all, silly Zhu is the only person who provides him with retirement. If something happens to the fool, then his future retirement life is basically hopeless. And Cheng's move at this time was also called a bottomless draw. What I drew was the silly pillar below Zhonghai and the deaf old lady. Director Yang's words almost made Zhonghai despair. But he made his own demands. "Director Yang, can I have a few words with him?" Director Yang did not refuse this request. "You can say it, you won't have a chance to say it when the police arrive." Zhonghai nodded in gratitude and walked to this window. Household registration. "You can see the silly pillar through this window." At this moment, silly Zhu was also hysterically shouting loudly there. Seeing Zhonghai coming, he quickly reached out his hand and grabbed his neck. "Grandpa, you must help me. I don't want to be taken away by the police and locked up for life." Looking at silly Zhu's down-to-earth appearance, Zhonghai also shook his head helplessly, wondering why he had chosen such a person in the first place. He simply couldn't understand why this foolish pillar would behave like this. Don't he know the consequences of stealing from the public? The previous thief has already been shot. It is very normal to be sentenced to life imprisonment if not executed this time. But seeing his own choice, he couldn't regret it. I saw him approach silly Zhu's ear and signal him to quiet down. And he whispered in his ear, "Pillar, did anyone else see you when you were taking these things today?" Silly Zhu recalled for a moment and then said, "When I answered these things, no one saw them. It's just that when they came out, Director Yang and his team seemed to intentionally intercept me here, waiting for me to come out. Intentionally over there." Zhonghai frowned and turned his head to look at Cheng and Su Dumao. He suddenly realized that this silly pillar was designed by someone else. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental that Cheng, Su Dumao, and even Director Yang would be here? The purpose is definitely to gamble when the silly pillar comes out. What he can be certain of at this moment is that it must be Cheng who caused trouble here. "Have you offended Cheng these past few days?" For the question that Zhonghai suddenly asked, silly Zhu was also stunned for a moment. I offended him, and how could I be? If it weren't for Director Yang being here, I wouldn't have been arrested." Zhonghai was angry at this moment, and he slapped silly Zhu's face. A bit resentful of not being able to turn iron into steel, he said, "What exactly happened? Tell me now. How did you offend him? Didn't I tell my ancestors to you? Without any evidence or confidence, don't provoke him before. Why don't you listen? Silly Zhu covered his hot face, feeling very uncomfortable. However, he still said with grievances, I just tore up his meal ticket while serving, and it has nothing to do with this matter now. Zhonghai's eyes widened. Tearing up such meal tickets is a violation of the law. Don't Li Cheng know this? He left without saying a word. It's very obvious. There must be something fishy going on here. Are you saying that after you tore up his meal ticket, he didn't do anything to you? At this moment, Silly Zhu nodded proudly and said, yes, he didn't do anything to me. Instead, he left the cafeteria in a disheveled manner. Zhonghai had suddenly realized. This matter is actually very obvious. It's the trigger triggered by the silly pillar, that's why it's like this. Looking at this foolish pillar that hates iron but cannot turn into steel, Zhonghai is also particularly speechless. It is obvious that in Director Yang's mind at this moment, the foolish pillar is nothing. Otherwise, it's impossible to just cooperate with them to capture this foolish pillar. In fact, all of these have been designed long ago, and Zhonghai has already guessed clearly. But I don't have any way to do it myself. After all, no matter how strong one's own strength is, they cannot compare to Director Yang in front of them. It's obvious that Director Yang doesn't want to let Silly Zhu go. Zhonghai, have you finished saying that? Zhonghai nodded awkwardly and said, I've finished speaking, and I'll just leave with Silly Zhu. At this moment, Silly Zhu was very desperate, and now Zhonghai can't help himself at all. And Zhonghai said that this opportunity is only possible if our ancestors come here. But how could the ancestors have come here? He had no idea about this news. Due to the rapid spread of this matter, the number of onlookers is also increasing. Silly Zhu was locked in a warehouse alone, like a monkey being pointed at by everyone. I didn't expect it. Our factory already has very good conditions for him. I didn't expect him to even want to steal things from the public. It's really hard to imagine pulling out the public's feathers. Isn't that right? We have a stable job now thanks to the steel rolling mill. Without this factory, to be honest, we are nothing. But this foolish pillar, he actually did such a thing. I really despise him. But now he's locked up, and when the police come, he'll have some good fruit to eat. It's said that one of them also stole something from the public last time, and the police directly shot him. I don't know if this foolish pillar is like this. Everyone is discussing here. Zhonghai's mind was spinning very fast, and he was trying his best to find a way to save the foolish pillar in front of him. But after thinking about it, there is only one way, and that is to seek help from the deaf old lady. Perhaps the deaf old lady has arrived, and Director Yang will give him face and take it lightly. After all, the deaf old lady is an old veteran in the steel rolling mill, and the leaders in these factories still have to look at his face. The previous leadership also showed great respect for deaf women. Mainly, he is not only a member of the 5 Guarantees household but also a family member of the martyrs. Ordinary leaders show respect when they see him. I looked around. He suddenly saw Qin Huairu in the crowd, and he actually knew it too. The reason why Silly Zhu took this lunchbox was completely for the sake of Qin Huairu, who had already hooked Silly Zhu's heart. So he walked up to Qin Huairu and whispered, "Do you also want the pillar to come out?" Qin Huairu, of course, thought about it. If he had a pillar, he would often help himself. "What's wrong, Grandpa? Do you have any ideas?" "Don't call me such a big shot, I'm not anymore," Zhonghai sighed. "But I also know that the reason why Silly Zhu would steal this kind of thing is definitely because of your request. Usually, he also takes this kind of leftover food with him. It's impossible for him to take such fresh meat. Did you ask him?" Qin Huairu looked at Zhonghai with the sharpest gaze. She didn't continue to keep it a secret. "Ah, it's true. My 2 children have always been determined to eat meat, so I wanted Brother Zhu to bring me some meat from the cafeteria. I didn't expect it to turn out like this, and I also feel very uncomfortable. Zhonghai nodded, but there was no blame at all, because he knew that this foolish pillar was willing. But the most important thing now is to tell Qinhuairu, since it's for you, then you have to help him. Now I have nothing else to do. Young factory director doesn't give me face at all. Go and invite our ancestors over and see if he has any solutions. I think young factory director should give him face. Upon hearing these words, Qinhuairu immediately turned around and left. Run quickly back to the courtyard. And on the side of the courtyard, the news has not yet reached here. As soon as Qinhuairu returned to the courtyard, he headed straight to the door of the deaf old lady's room. And loudly knocking on the door. The deaf old lady was originally resting in the room when suddenly she heard a hurried knocking on the door. He opened the door and saw that it was Qinhuairu. What are you doing here? The deaf old lady has no good opinion of Qinhuairu, mainly because this widow has been flirting with her good grandson. He can see clearly and clearly. This widow is not an ordinary person. She has been captivated by silly pillars and cannot extricate herself. The pillar has already been captured and locked up. Zhonghai asked me to come 3.2 to call you over. The deaf old lady, who was originally planning to close the door, suddenly became excited upon hearing this. Who caught my precious son? What's going on? You tell me quickly. Qinhuairu took a breath and explained everything in detail. Hear your good grandson and do such a thing. The deaf old lady's heart is also very helpless, but no matter what, he is still his precious grandson. She picked up his cane and quickly walked out towards the courtyard. Qinhuai does not have such a fast speed. Isn't he an old lady in her 60s or 70s? How can she walk like she's 16 or 17? Usually, it's obvious that it's just a facade. The deaf old lady is on the verge of going crazy. Silly Zhu is his precious grandson, who is the one who takes care of him. But if these people dare to capture their grandchildren, it must be their end. She and Qinhuairu quickly ran to the door of this warehouse in the steel rolling mill. It only took about 10 minutes. The two of them walked and ran at a fast pace. And when they arrived, the police also arrived at that time. Zhonghai saw it and the deaf old lady rushed over. My ancestors, if you come a little late, stupid Jew may be caught. Hurry up and tell Director Yang that your identity is a 5 guarantees household and a martyr's family member. He will definitely give you face. The deaf old lady nodded and saw that the police wanted to handcuff this foolish pillar. He shouted loudly, I see who dares to take my body away, I have nothing to do with you. At this moment, the deaf old lady approached the police and pushed the two police officers away. The police were all confused. How could this old lady with white hair be so strong? What are you doing? We are law enforcement, please don't obstruct law enforcement here, said the police officer very seriously. Chapter 4. One sentence scares the deaf old lady. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In this era, pushing the police is a very serious matter. But the deaf old lady in front of me not only pushed, but also loudly said, anyway, my precious grandson cannot be taken away by you today. At this point, the two police officers also saw clearly. This deaf old lady is the ancestor of the courtyard house, and due to her age, she played an important role in the revolution when she was young. The key is still the families of the martyrs, and they are also eligible for 5 guarantees. So the police immediately calmed down. Where is he, your grandson? We don't know. You better leave now. He has stolen public food, which is a very serious matter and will affect the entire atmosphere. We must take it away. But no matter what the police in front of me say, the deaf old lady here has never let go. At this moment, Director Yang walked over and looked at him coldly. You're so old, why are you still joining in here? Hurry up and go back to the courtyard. He looked at Director Yang. The deaf old lady, however, showed no fear at all. Instead, she loudly scolded, "I had a very good relationship with your old factory director before you even sat in this position. Now, are you coming to teach me a lesson? At this moment, he is here again, relying on his old age to sell off." Everyone was also very shocked and they heard it. No one dares to say that to the factory director yet. Director Yang originally had great respect for these elderly people. After all, respecting the elderly and loving the young is a traditional virtue. But the old lady in front of him is clearly unreasonable. Didn't you hear clearly? He broke the law, so the police wanted to take him away. He broke the law, can you hear him? Yang Cheng said loudly. Of course I can hear you, didn't I just take one of your public chickens? I'll just buy one and compensate you, as for calling the police over. After hearing this, Director Yang was also very helpless. These are two things. If this behavior of drawing has been established, it means he has already violated the law, rather than saying that you can exchange a chicken for it. Do you understand what I'm saying? The deaf old lady shook her head. I didn't understand, but all I know is that you can't take my good grandson away unless you pass my level first. At this moment, the deaf old lady reached out and stopped in front of the police, thus falling into a deadlock. At this moment, Director Yang is really angry. To be honest, he originally saw that he was older and still a disadvantaged family member and a member of the 5 Guarantees household, which is why he showed such respect to him. But you respect him, he doesn't even put your respect in his heart. So at this moment, Director Yang also felt that there was no need to be so polite to him anymore. If you continue to cause trouble here, we won't be polite to you. Director Yang looked at him very seriously and said. But at this moment, the deaf old lady felt as if she had not heard the words of the factory director, and did not take them to heart at all. I didn't cause any trouble here. The pillar has been working in your factory for so many years, with no credit or hard work. Just because of a chicken, you took it away. You are too merciless, right? Director Yang, for the sake of my face, let go of my grandson. Let this thing go like this, it's like it never happened. At this moment, the deaf old lady's tone softened because he knew that only in this way could they have empathy. If they had empathy, this matter could be resolved in this way. As Director Yang seemed to have a slight movement in his mind, Cheng walked over beside him. Then he looked at the deaf old man and said coldly, "Don't you know that Huayan's official duties are also illegal? Do you want the police to take you away?" As soon as she finished speaking, the deaf old lady started cursing and saying, "You're a 1,000-knives slayer. Why don't you tell me here? Don't think I don't know. My grandson has become like this now, it must be related to you. The 5,000 yuan last time must have something to do with you, how could Su Dumao's brain think of such a solution?" I heard this. Cheng smiled and said, "You can say whatever you like. Your precious grandson today has already violated the law. Even if the heavenly king comes, he will have to be taken away. You have no use making trouble here, it will make everyone think you are particularly ridiculous." The deaf old lady was angry and said, "I tell you not to be big or small. Don't think that you can be lawless by becoming a clerk in a neighborhood committee. When you work here, you haven't been born yet. Relying on old age to sell old age again here." Cheng never took his words to heart. Just looked at the people around and said calmly. We also know that if this elderly person is worthy of respect, it is also appropriate for us as young people to respect them. However, some elderly people are not worthy of respect, so there is no need for me to respect them, there is no need at all. Yes. Cheng was not at all afraid of this deaf old lady at this moment. Because as a traveler, Cheng's background is clear. Although on the surface he appears to be a martyr, he is a poor family member and a 5 Guarantee household. But to be honest, both of these may be fake. All of them are fake by him, because there is no evidence to prove that he is of this identity. I saw the deaf old lady start rolling around. He suddenly sat on the ground, like the previous Jia Zhang family. Neighbors, relatives and friends, you see, this person is not big or small, bullying me, this old lady. She said, tears streaming down her face. The acting skills are very good. Director Yang looked on helplessly from the side. So he walked up to Li Cheng and tugged at him, saying, don't provoke him. He himself is a member of the martyr's family. Treating him like this is a bit bad for you, and others will blame you. Regarding Director Yang's words, Li Cheng also knows that he cares about himself. At this moment, Zhonghai next to him also seized this opportunity. Colleagues and neighbors, look, Li Cheng doesn't know how to respect the old and love the young at all. The old lady's family is a martyr's family, and they are also protected by the 5 protections. If his experience is still in this world, then how cold they are. Zhonghai, who looked righteous, once again showed his specialty. I have to say his move. It has aroused sympathy from many people. Some people even started interrupting. Li Cheng, he is a martyr and his family is so old. You shouldn't talk to him like that. Yes, what we need to pay attention to is respecting the elderly and loving the young. People are now lying on the ground, and your attitude is indeed a bit bad. As younger generations, we should take care of these elderly people. Isn't it? He's so pitiful, he seems to be limping and his ears are a bit hard to hear. We also need to feel sorry for him. The onlookers said to each other. Zhonghai and the deaf old lady were both very happy to hear this. Because their strategy has already been successful. They know the weakness of people nowadays, which is the rampant sympathy. As long as we utilize their empathy, we can stand undefeated. Just like now. Everyone stands on their own side, even if Director Yang and Li Cheng want to send the silly pillar away, there is no other way. In fact, Li Cheng had already anticipated this one. At this moment, Su Damao walked over and saw the very awkward situation. He also loudly said, I said Zhonghai and the deaf old lady. Can you two stop playing this trick every day? It's really interesting to win everyone's sympathy every day. When I was in the courtyard, I was also being messed up by you every day. No matter what mistake foolish Zhu made, you would blame him on me. I was also drunk, and everyone would stand on your side. It's not because you two have good acting skills. Do you think I don't know? You must be laughing at these people who sympathize with you in your heart. Colleagues, there's no need to sympathize. You sympathize with them like this and still mock you in your heart. I'm used to both of them using this trick. Upon hearing Su Damao's words, Zhonghai's face turned green. Do you have the right to speak here? Zhonghai scolded loudly. Why doesn't I have the right to speak? Everyone has the right to express their thoughts. Zhonghai, do you think you're still the big one in our courtyard? I'll tell you, you're nothing now. Su Damao said coldly, after all these years of suffering, he suddenly erupted. This statement is against Zhonghai, who has nothing to say. As this foolish pillar was caught, it was slowly dragging on. At this moment, Li Cheng waved his hand and gestured for Su Damao to be quiet. Su Damao immediately quieted down, and the others also carefully watched Li Cheng. What exactly did he want to do? Director Yang next to him is also very curious. Li Jianli walked up to the deaf old lady and looked at him, whispering in her ear. If you continue to make trouble here like this, don't blame me for exposing your identity as a martyr's family member. Hearing this, the deaf old lady's face immediately turned black. He opened his mouth wide and couldn't speak. Because this secret is actually only known to him, not even Zhonghai. How could Li Cheng in front of him possibly know? After a minute, the deaf old lady finally calmed down. But the change in the deaf old lady's expression was clearly visible to Li Cheng, indicating that when he said these words, it caused fluctuations in his emotions. That is to say, the identity of the family members of this deaf old woman's martyr must be fake. This 5 guarantees household may also be fraudulent. But there's no need to tell him now. After all, I don't have any evidence at my disposal. Saying without evidence for no reason will greatly affect the subsequent investigation. But at this moment, the deaf old lady looked at Li Cheng as if she had seen a ghost. He quickly got up from the ground. Because he knew that if others also found out that he had falsified his identity, he might have been directly shot today, and there were other things to consider. As for this foolish pillar, if he wants to be taken away, he can't even afford to worry about it. The deaf old lady got up from the ground and quickly wanted to leave. The silly pillars here, Zhonghai, and all the others were stunned. Old ancestor, what are you doing here? Zhonghai followed behind him and said loudly. Old lady, won't you help me? But your kind heart, won't you help me? The silly pillar shouted at this moment, exhausted. But this deaf old lady doesn't even look back. He walks very fast and doesn't look like an old lady at all. Zhonghai can hardly catch up. As they watched the two of them leave, everyone was bewildered. Director Yang also walked over curiously and asked, what did you say to him? Why did he feel so scared? His mouth was still so hard just now, and you could drive him away with just one sentence. I'm particularly curious. Li Qingdao didn't say anything, just said lightly, I'm not sure about that either, I just casually said it. Director Yang was lost in thought. I didn't ask any further questions. Others were also curious, but Li Cheng did not reveal everything he had said. There is no need for this now. On the other side, Zhonghai finally caught up with the deaf old lady. He grabbed the deaf old lady and said loudly, what's wrong with you? What did he say to you? Why do you want to run away? Don't you want to help yourself, your precious grandson? The deaf old lady sighed and said, in today's situation where people take bribes and get them, do you think I can help? I thought I could use their sympathy to sympathize with me, but I didn't expect they wouldn't even accept this kind of thing. Zhonghai felt that the deaf old lady had not told the truth. So he continued to ask, what did he say to you? He made you so scared. He didn't say anything, don't ask so many questions. 933 Zhonghai looked bewildered. He never expected the attitude of the deaf old lady to change so quickly. But he must ask this matter clearly. Because he placed all his wealth on silly Zhu. If he were caught like this, his investment would be ruined if he had already put 5,000 yuan in his coffin. He does not allow such things to happen. Is there something that even I can't say? If stupid Zhu is locked up directly, then what chance do we have to get it out in the future? Our years of investment will be ruined. I must figure out the truth of this fact. The deaf old lady only stopped when she heard this. I saw him sighing and saying, isn't it that I don't want to save my precious grandson? You know that he will be the only one who cares for me in the future, how could I possibly not want to save, but it seems that Li Cheng knows the secret about me. If I stay there any longer and he reveals my secret, then I have to go in too. Upon hearing this, Zhonghai was also very shocked. What secret is there? What do you mean by going in? Did you do anything illegal or criminal? Anyway, I won't say anything more to you. That's all I have to say. I may not be able to save you today. Let's think of other ways when we go back. After saying these words, the deaf old lady hurriedly returned to her own room, his whole body still covered in cold sweat. Returning to the room, he pondered and pondered. I can't figure it out, how could this stinky kid know his secret? Did he just test himself just now? Yes, it must be just a probe. As long as you don't admit it, no one knows that your identity is fake. There is no evidence, nothing. The people from the beginning are all gone. How could there be evidence to know about oneself? Thinking of this, the deaf old lady's heart finally calmed down. He felt that he had been deceived by Li Cheng's testimony and had used the method of provocation to surrender himself. I didn't expect that I was really fooled. Do I have to kill Li Cheng, this little rabbit? On the other hand, silly Zhu was quickly taken away by the police without the help of Zhonghai and the deaf old lady. Although he cried loudly here all the way. But no one paid any attention to him, nor did anyone help him. Qin Huairu also looked coldly beside him, because he was powerless. It was only natural for the foolish pillar to be taken away by the police comrades, and Li Cheng on this side also breathed a sigh of relief. This matter finally succeeded smoothly. But this is just a small part of my own plan. There are still many secrets on silly Zhu's body. Pulling a hair can move his whole body. To be honest, a big event is about to happen in the courtyard. Because the secret of the He family is also about to be revealed. Daqing ran away from home, and Li Cheng was well aware of the secret of the Tan family's dishes in the He family. If you want to send stupid Zhu in, you can't let him out. Chapter 5 Neighborhood Committee Verification. The amazing secret of the He family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The silly pillar on this side was taken away. It also caused a huge uproar in the courtyard. Especially when Rainwater found out, he almost went crazy. The key point is that what Zhonghai told Rainwater was that the reason why silly pillar was locked in was because of Li Cheng. Sao discord here. Of course, Li Cheng doesn't care about Rainwater, and Rainwater is not his own relative or anything. He can think whatever he wants, and it has nothing to do with himself. And at this moment, what Li Cheng wants is that silly pillar to always be carried in the cell and never get out. Don't say that you are particularly ruthless in your actions, this kind of thing just needs to be a little more ruthless. And he really broke the law. Everything has a law to follow, and it's not just about framing others on your own. Inside a courtyard house. At this moment, everyone is discussing and discussing. Have you heard about it? It seems that silly Zhu has already been arrested because he stole something from the public house. Both Zhonghai and the deaf old lady couldn't be saved by going to jail. He has now been locked up in a cell. Of course we have heard about it. How could we not have heard about it so much? But I can't figure it out. With his salary of over 30 yuan per person, how could he possibly use it all? Why would he still steal from the government? Isn't this like lifting a stone and hitting himself in the foot? I really can't figure it out. It's really pitiful for his sister to be here alone now. I see he's always inside the house lately. Cry. Everyone sat there, munching on melon seeds and chatting here. Anyway, all the topics are focused on silly Zhu. And on this side. At this time, Li Cheng was not in the courtyard, he was helping in the neighborhood committee. Since he became a clerk in the neighborhood committee, he always comes to the committee to help when he has nothing to do. And at this point, Director Luo has already arranged tasks for him. That's to verify everyone's household registration and identity background in the courtyard. The entire courtyard was handed over to Li Cheng for investigation, and of course, Li Cheng gladly accepted this task. Although the task assigned is to verify how many children have been born in each household, they need to register their household registration. But the neighborhood committee actually has a lot of information, including their previous information, which is particularly complete. The function of the neighborhood committee is to serve as an external unit of the street office. The rights they possess are also quite significant, although none of them are public officials. Even in this era, you may not have a salary when working in a neighborhood committee, but everyone works with their own enthusiasm. I have also come into contact with a lot of neighbors. Li Cheng sat in the dilapidated office of the neighborhood committee, and Director Luo beside him looked at him with a smile and said, "The conditions here are a bit simple, I'm a bit sorry, but now the work tasks are quite heavy, and I can only do you a wrong." Li Cheng doesn't mind at all. Our ultimate goal is to serve the people without any worries. Upon hearing these words, Director Luo laughed heartily and said, "Shaoli, you really have consciousness. Then I'll leave all the information in your courtyard to you." Li Cheng nodded and said he would definitely handle this matter well. He retrieved all the information of the residents in the courtyard. Today, his main focus is to check the information of the He family. Because he had already known before his travels that his identity was fake in the He family. Their family may actually belong to the class of hired peasants, but later on, for the convenience of work, Daqing changed it directly to poor peasants. Of course, no one knows how to modify it. Cheng doesn't need to know, just know what he changed. More importantly, besides this, he may have other secrets. That's this Daqing's 10 family dish, which used to be a royal dish. If there is no identity, one will not have access to this 10 family dish. However, the specifically Cheng is also very vague. He searched through the information of the He family and found that it was indeed written clearly. That is to say, the He family mentioned above is indeed 3 generations of poor peasants. But Cheng could clearly see that the thing above had been tampered with. Doesn't he know who checked before? This is the strangest thing about Cheng, is there anyone admitting his existence? Cheng didn't think much about this and suddenly called his colleagues over. Brother Wang, how do I think this information seems to have been tampered with on the registration? Take a look at N. This Wang is also a clerk in the neighborhood committee. You came earlier yourself. In this neighborhood committee, there is actually no salary, and everyone is voluntary. Upon hearing this, he quickly picked up the information and took a look. At first glance, it seems like someone has really tampered with these materials. Is it true that someone has tampered with them? We can't be sure now, let's talk to Director Luo. Cheng nodded. So the two of them also knocked on the door of Director Luo's office and saw Cheng and the other 2 coming over. He was very curious. Do you have anything to do with me? Cheng nodded and handed the document to Director Luo in front of him. Director, please take a look. While checking this document, I found that it seems to have been tampered with by someone else, so I want to confirm with you. Director Luo's expression became somewhat strange upon hearing these words. He carefully examined this document. It is obvious that all the information about the He family in the courtyard is available. Looking at the smudges on it, it seems like someone has really tampered with it. Let me take a look again, and the names written on it seem to be He Daqing, He Yuzhu, and He Rainwater. How come these names are so familiar? Is this He Yuzhu the foolish one who was caught a few days ago? Cheng nodded at this moment and said, he was indeed caught just now because he stole food from the public in the steel mill. That's no wonder. He seems to be a chef in a steel rolling mill. I remember his father used to be a chef in the factory and left the courtyard for some reason. The information above is quite vague and seems to have been altered in some places. However, I am quite familiar with the He family and their cooking skills. To be honest, they are indeed very good. I saw Director Yang open the conversation folder. Cheng also smiled and said, what should I do if I encounter such a situation of tampering with information? Director Luo. This kind of thing is very serious and cannot be tampered with by anyone. If it is found, it must be dealt with seriously, and you must check the information on it carefully. Cheng nodded. I have actually found out. Director Luo, could you recall that their family is very skilled in stir-frying? It seems that the most skilled dish is probably the Tan family's cuisine, right? Director Luo sat on the chair, closed his eyes and reminisced, then nodded. It seems like, I remember clearly, that He Daqing even showed a hand in front of me back then. It was this Tan family dish. I have to say it was really delicious. But what do you ask about this and what does it have to do with it? Cheng then explained, it's indeed related. As far as I know from my research, Tan family dishes used to be palace dishes, and ordinary people wouldn't even have access to them. If we were to tell the truth about their identities, this document stated that they were 3 generations of poor farmers. To be honest, they wouldn't have access to this Tan family dish. Hear this. Director Luo here also suddenly realized. Yeah, as far as I know, this Tan family dish is a palace dish, but we didn't think much about it or what his identity was. We just focused on the delicious food. But let me tell you, Shaoli, our culture has been particularly tense lately. If anyone really has a bad background or falsifies their identity, we must deal with it seriously. The task assigned to you this time is also part of it, you must do it well. Upon hearing this, Cheng finally felt relieved. It is indeed true that the current situation is tense, and the task of the neighborhood committee is to investigate and identify such fraudulent or bad practices. And what Cheng has found now is the He family, Director Luo. It's obvious that this information about his family is fake. His family should be employed by the third generation, not as a poor farmer. We should all be able to understand this. Director Luo nodded in agreement. But we don't have much evidence for this, do we? You can't just claim that someone has changed the information just because it looks like it has been changed. If you can't provide evidence, how can you prove that someone is not a third-generation poor farmer? This is the most important issue that Director Luo needs to consider. Without evidence, all he talks about is nonsense and nonsense. For this point, Li Qingdao feels that there are indeed no practical policies at the moment. After all, so many years have passed, who would remember such old things? No one would even remember. However, at this point, Li Cheng already had a solution, and his breakthrough point was undoubtedly the foolish pillar. These days, Silly Zhu feels very uncomfortable being locked up in the cell, as if he has aged 10 years. The key is that he and Jia Zhang are locked together. When Jia Zhang saw him, he cursed loudly and kept chattering incessantly. Finally, it was Silly Zhu, who couldn't bear it anymore. He gave him 2 slaps and the Jia Zhang clan finally calmed down for a while. At this moment, Silly Zhu was almost going crazy. I didn't expect to take so many years of leftover food from these leaders in the cafeteria. Just as I picked up some fresh chicken that day, I was caught on the spot. It's really unlucky. I feel like my whole life is about to be ruined. I thought the deaf old lady Ni Zhonghai would jump out to save me, but I found that these 2 people were indifferent. I used to say well that I would definitely save myself, but when I turned around, I didn't recognize anyone. It's really despicable. At this moment, suddenly, the door of the prison cell opened and a burst of light came in, piercing the foolish pillar's eyes a bit hard to open. Silly Zhu is feeling very comfortable in the cell, isn't he? Suddenly, a familiar voice came from him. Make Silly Zhu very angry. Li Cheng, you are a killer. What are you doing here? Don't think I don't know that I was locked up here because of you. You specifically designed for Director Yang and his team to wait for me at this entrance, that's why you caught me on the spot, didn't you? Upon hearing this, Li Cheng smiled. Are you really interested in telling me this? If it weren't for you constantly stealing things from here and from our steel rolling mill, even if the Heavenly King comes, we wouldn't be able to catch you, right? You stole things yourself, you're really sorry to say that. This statement left stupid Zhu speechless. So what are you doing here today? We are all neighbors, can't I just chat with you or something? Li Cheng chuckled. You're chatting with me, I'm afraid you might not have any good intentions. I don't understand why you keep targeting me. Silly Zhu gritted his teeth in anger at this moment. Upon hearing this, Li Cheng became angry and said, I'm targeting you. You're really sorry to say that. Didn't our Li family have been targeted by you all along in the past? Why didn't you say a word or fart at that time? Now, I'm sorry to say I'm targeting you. You were originally a lawbreaker, and when the Heavenly King Laozi comes, you are also a lawbreaker. Don't you have any points in your heart? I came here today to ask you a question, you must be honest and explain it yourself. If you explain it well, you may receive a lighter punishment. If you don't explain it well, you may really be shot. Silly Zhu is on the verge of collapse. Isn't it just stealing a piece of chicken? As for how serious it is, Isn't it just stealing a piece of chicken? Li Qing sneered, don't you know that the current situation is particularly serious? It's not excessive to be shot 100 times for something like this. It's the person who stole an egg and has already been shot, not to mention stealing a chicken, and what you stole is still the machine in our factory. It's even more guilty. Think carefully for yourself, if you don't cooperate, you'll have to wait for the fate of being shot. Li Cheng's 3 or 2 words directly stunned Silly Zhu. What are you trying to say? What are you trying to ask me? Silly Zhu was really about to cry at this moment. Seeing Silly Zhu's appearance, Li Cheng said slowly, when I was sorting out information at the street office, I found out that your identity as a he family seems to be fabricated. Shouldn't your family have the identity of a third-generation poor farmer? Even if you are foolish enough to hear this, you know what it means. Silly Zhu shook his head desperately and said, did you make a mistake? My family was originally 3 generations of poor farmers, and they have always been. How could this identity be fake? It seems that this foolish pillar still has some brain. You're going to be shot, aren't you telling the truth? I was shot, that's when I spoke the truth. To be honest, you must have made a mistake. I saw Silly Zhu gritting his teeth here and insisting. Li Qinggang wanted to take out his own truth talisman from his body. This thing is also checked in by the system. Similar to Nightmare Talisman. The function is to immerse oneself in the minds of others and then come into play. The truth symbol, as the name suggests, means that person can speak the truth. He was just about to take action. Suddenly, Jia Zhongshi pushed a wheelchair and walked over. If I had told this fact, could I have my sentence reduced? Seeing Jia Zhang, Li Chengdu almost forgot about such a person. Oh, what do you know? Tell me, if I reveal these things, will you reduce your sentence? Jia Zhongshi asked from here. Li Cheng shook his head and said, I know this is all a police matter, and it has nothing to do with me. But if you say that, I can make your life in prison better, not as miserable as it is now. Upon hearing these words, Jia Zhang became very indifferent and said, the identity of the He family, also known as the Silly Zhu family, was originally fabricated. I can confirm this because I was present at the scene when they fabricated it. Their family was originally a third-generation hired farmer, and in order to work in the steel rolling mill, they tampered with the identity of a third-generation poor farmer. What I saw was clear, and I remember it was also clear. And this thing is not only known to me, but also to Zhonghai and the deaf old lady Silly Zhu. Silly Zhu heard these words and felt like crying without tears. This person is not trustworthy at all. Didn't they say that no one would speak out? Why did you suddenly speak out again? Jia Zhang smiled and said, we are all living like this in prison. You still make me keep my promise here. You are really sorry. It was your family's identity that was fake, but don't you admit it now? If you think for a moment, you all know that your family has kitchen coins. They used to be imperial kitchen coins in the palace. How could they be 3 generations of poor farmers? Chapter 6. Anger of the director of the neighborhood committee, Silly Pillar was sentenced to death. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. What Jia Zhang said made Silly Zhu's face turn pale. When I was still young. His father, Daqing, has been instructing them all along. Be sure not to leak this information. Because in this era, identity and background are very important. The 3 generations of poor peasants and the 3 generations of hired peasants are completely 2 classes. Even if you want to work in a steel rolling mill, you can't even work as a farmer. Only mediocre people can work. That's also why they put in so much effort to establish this identity as poor farmers, even willing to do it. Because although the identity of a hired farmer may be better than that of a capitalist, it is basically difficult to move forward. Seeing Jia Zhang's face, he was stunned and really screamed, I asked you to keep your mouth closed. Why are you looking like this? You're not afraid of thunder and lightning. You swore and got so many benefits back then. Jia Zhang's face was indeed indifferent, and he said a particularly reasonable sentence. Those who have sworn before can just listen. Now they have become disabled, and they are still sitting in a wheelchair in prison. I don't know when they will disappear. I must make myself live better. As for this kind of oath, let him go. Li Cheng watched the performance of the two of them. He wanted to use this truth symbol to make this foolish pillar speak it out, but now it's completely useless. The Jia Zhang family next to him has already revealed everything in detail. At this moment, Li Cheng smiled and said to the others. Director Luo, come out now. This matter is also clear and understandable. At this moment, Director Luo and several members of the neighborhood committee walked out one after another. It turned out to be Li Cheng, asking them to wait behind and let themselves figure it out first. They were a bit skeptical at first because the original information was not handled by them. Director Luo was also quite shocked and he heard what the foolish Zhu Jiazhang had said. He walked out and said angrily, "Stupid Zhu, I didn't expect your family to even fake their identity. You guys really ate the bear's heart and leopard's gall, right?" At this moment, silly Zhu is really speechless, he really has nothing to say. Because all the facts have already been revealed by this Jia Zhang family, there is no possibility of one's own sophistry here. He suddenly burst into tears and said, "This matter itself has nothing to do with us. Back then, we were very young, how did we know about this thing? For the sake of my young age and lack of understanding, don't pursue it anymore. Also, my younger sister was younger at the time and didn't understand at all. Don't pursue his responsibility anymore. He is still in high school now, and if he knew this identity, he might not even be able to attend high school. Silly pillar, it's like saying your last words before death." Director Luo next to him also sighed and said, "Anyway, it's because your family's identity was forged that you were able to work in the steel rolling mill for so many years. You have already gained a lot of benefits because of this identity, so you must also bear the corresponding responsibility. Since this matter is now clear and straightforward, then you really need to be punished even more. Stealing public food is already very serious, and now coupled with identity fraud, you may be directly shot." Upon hearing these words, silly Zhu's face turned pale and he sat on the ground. He never thought of it. I will come to this point. At this moment, he was completely desperate. Because he seems to have already felt that even the deaf old lady and Zhonghai cannot save him. "For the sake of our neighbors many years, Li Cheng, please let me go," said silly Zhu with great sadness. But Li Cheng felt like he hadn't seen it. He said coldly, "It's useless to tell me this, and I don't have the right to let you go. If you violate this law, you must be severely punished by the law, and I don't have the right either. No one has it." After saying these words, Li Cheng turned around and left here. Because the goal he wanted today has already been achieved. Director Luo and several members of the neighborhood committee also walked out one after another. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect that the news about their he family was really fake. Shaoli, it's better for you to handle things carefully. We haven't noticed it in all these years. Director Luo greatly appreciated and patted Li Cheng's shoulder, saying happily. In this era, identity fraud is really a trend. Now the country is ready to crack down on such fraudulent behavior. And at this moment, silly Zhu's fraudulent behavior is going crazy. They have investigated and dealt with such fraudulent behavior, and they will also receive certain rewards when they come out. So Director Luo is very happy at this moment, which also indicates that the superior leaders will reward them. Every time this was actually done under the guidance of Director Luo, it was only with Director Luo's guidance that I was able to smoothly investigate. Li Qingshu attributed all the credit to Director Luo, which was inevitable. Don't compete with your leaders for such achievements. This is the most important consciousness as a subordinate. Director Luo looked at Li Cheng with a long tail, and the two of them felt very happy. Shaoli, I think you have a very strong ability to handle things. Have you ever considered becoming the deputy director of our neighborhood committee? Upon hearing this, Li Cheng was also stunned for a moment. Our mission is to serve the people. Thank you for your esteemed leadership. I am willing to serve as the deputy director of the neighborhood committee, so that I can better serve the people in our neighborhood. Director Luo nodded happily and said, I was afraid you wouldn't agree. Since you agreed, I will report to my superiors. It shouldn't be a problem, after all, you have made such a big contribution. Thank you, Director. Li Cheng looked at him very sincerely and said. Return to the neighborhood committee. Director Luo's face immediately became even more serious. He looked at the people below and said loudly. Can't you even find out about this fraud? Now everyone is urging us to investigate everyone's identity and background. After all this time, you still have Shaoli find out. I don't know what you're doing here. Director Luo intentionally looked at these subordinates with anger, in order to establish his own dignity. Li Cheng could clearly see it from the side. After returning to the courtyard house, the news of the He family's identity fraud quickly spread. Everyone in this courtyard is discussing and discussing. Have you heard that the identity of Silly Zhu's family was actually fake? It has been discovered by the neighborhood committee. A few days ago, when he was on the bus, it was discovered that he had been falsely identified. It seems that he may not be able to get out of his cell, and this may really mean he will be shot. Isn't that right? If he just steals public food, he is likely to be executed by firing squad. Now that the crime has worsened and it has been discovered that he has forged his identity, I think he will definitely be executed by firing squad for this kind of sentence. As for when he will be executed by firing squad, I don't know. Ah, how could a good person suddenly become like this? He was doing well as a chef in a steel rolling mill, why did he do such a thing? I can't figure it out. At this moment, Li Cheng had just returned and saw that the people here had already started discussing. It must be said that their information was so well informed. When they saw Li Cheng, they greeted him with a smile and asked, well, Clerk Li, you just came out of the neighborhood committee now. Is it true that the identity of the foolish Zhu family was fake? Did you really find out about this? It was Lu Haizhong who was speaking, although he was in this courtyard and now holds the position of an old master. But to be honest, the actual controller is still Li Cheng, and of course, Lu Haizhong didn't say much about this. After all, Li Cheng at this time was a member of the neighborhood committee and his superior, so he naturally respected his superiors. Li Cheng nodded as he looked at him and said, it was indeed discovered today, and it was Jia Zhang who personally said that Silly Zhu and his family have the identity of 3 generations of hired farmers, but they have tampered with the identity of 3 generations of poor farmers. This is identity fraud. At this moment, Lu Haizhong also took a cold breath. I didn't expect things to be like this. If you falsify your identity, you must take responsibility. Then Li Cheng suddenly remembered something and said to Lu Haizhong, in 5 minutes, you can call everyone over and I will have a meeting for everyone. Upon hearing these words, Lu Haizhong was immediately very happy. Because he knows that every meeting is when he exercises his power. So he knocked on the door from door to door with a thud. Li Cheng went back home first. My own mother and Siheyuan saw her son come back and asked, is it really fake? Is the identity of the He family really fake? Li Cheng nodded and said, this is indeed what was found out. His family is a 3rd generation hired farmer, not a 3rd generation poor farmer. When we hold a quadrangle meeting later, what our Lord, BCD, wants is this matter. Yu Siheyuan was also very uncomfortable. So, this foolish pillar must have been shot. Isn't this adding insult to injury? Li Cheng nodded and said, it's highly likely that this will happen. Oh, what a pity. Yu Siheyuan sighed. Mom, there's no shame in this. Everyone has to take responsibility for their actions. This is something we can't do. If you break the law, you will be held accountable by the law. Otherwise, the world will be in chaos. Upon hearing her son say these words, Siheyuan didn't say much. Not long after, everyone in the courtyard gathered in the center. At this moment, Cheng sat on the four-arc in the middle, just like Zhonghai in the past. But to be honest, as the saying goes, 30 years east and 30 years west. At this moment, Zhonghai sat on a nearby stool, just an ordinary resident. And he and the deaf old lady were also very anxious in their hearts. Because they also heard news that the identity of the employee employed by the silly Pillar's family had been discovered. They really hate this Jia Zhang family, because they were also present at the scene when this identity was forged. So they actually know about this matter, and if they pursue it, the two of them will also have a grudge. So at this moment, the two of them are also very nervous. Cheng saw that everyone was here, so he also spoke up. Today we are gathering everyone here to convey the spirit of our neighborhood committee. Today, when we were checking everyone's information at the neighborhood committee, we unexpectedly discovered that the identity of the He family was fake. As we all know, the country has been paying great attention to this issue of identity recently. Just like how our neighborhood committee wants to greatly increase the proportion of workers and farmers, we need to make our management team more and more pure. It was indeed in that era. At the beginning of the establishment of the neighborhood committee, this component was not very pure. There are many capitalists and hired farmers inside, with everything in every component. This has led to a lack of enthusiasm among everyone when working. Moreover, the ideological consciousness of capitalists and hired peasants is that of petty bourgeoisie. This kind of meaning is that the service is not good, for the neighbors and the general public. The leaders above are also aware of this, so they need to renovate this street office and neighborhood committee. Increase the composition and proportion of grassroots farmers and workers. So he needs to investigate everyone's identity and background thoroughly. And at this moment, the neighborhood committee is doing such a thing. Speaking of which, Cheng paused for a moment and looked at the expressions of everyone. Because he knows that handling the identity of many people on this street may really be problematic. For example, the deaf old lady Zhonghai and the He family actually have problems. But for some people, he doesn't have any evidence at the moment, but this kind of thing is slowly happening. Sure enough, when Cheng saw the expressions of Zhonghai and the deaf old lady, both of them were pale and clearly frightened. Cheng sneered inwardly, as it was time to settle the accounts after autumn. I saw him continuing to speak. The identity fraud of the He family is now clear, and as you all know, this kind of fraud is a very serious crime. Nowadays, silly Zhu can hardly get out of the cell, and I have heard that he may be directly shot. If you don't know when, it may be very soon. If you have anything you want to say to him, you must finish it quickly, otherwise there will be nothing left if it's too cold. Also, if there are any issues with your family's identity and background, you should proactively report to our neighborhood committee so that we can receive a lighter punishment. Otherwise, if we find out, it will be a heavier punishment. When he said this, he deliberately increased his voice. His eyes were also very cold as he looked at the deaf old lady. He doesn't need to directly arrest them now because the evidence is indeed insufficient. What he is doing now is to drive them crazy. Let each of them live every day in fear, unable to eat or sleep well. That's the chance. It is not too late for a gentleman to seek revenge, but now is the time for revenge. There's no need to wait for these 10 years. Alright, that's all for my words. Do you have anything to say? As soon as the words fell, the people below began to discuss with each other. My identity is definitely not a problem. My family is a 3-generation poor farmer, and it's useless who comes. Your family is a 3-generation poor farmer, it seems like my family is different. My family is even poorer and even more impoverished. Yeah, my family too, so this incident doesn't actually have a significant impact on us. However, this foolish pillar is about to be shot. It's a pity to be so young. What's so pitiful about this? Everyone must take responsibility for their actions, and that's how silly Zhu is. They have to do such a thing, and we can't do it either. Seeing that no one had spoken up, Cheng dissolved the conference. The main purpose of this trip is to shake the mountain and make them understand in their hearts that Cheng's aspirations are coming. On this side, Rainwater was on the verge of collapse. He was in high school when suddenly his teacher kicked him out. He was completely bewildered, the teacher only said later. It turned out that his family identity was fake and he couldn't attend high school. He returned to the courtyard in tears. And everyone looked at him with that kind of contemptuous gaze. He doesn't know what happened. So he found the deaf old lady and knocked on the door. The deaf old lady opened the door and saw what Rain was in front of her. She quickly pulled him in and said, "Rain, how did you come back?" Rainwater tearfully recounted his situation. The deaf old lady also sighed and said, "There is only one way now, maybe we can save your home." Rainwater widened his eyes and asked, "What method?" "Go to Baoding and call your father back. He will explain this matter clearly and see what's going on. Call Daqing back, maybe there's still a glimmer of hope." Although Rainwater is unwilling, there is no way out. Chapter 7. Daqing returns, wrath draws Zhonghai. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Baoding, Hebei. At this moment, there is a resident's doorstep. A little girl came here with a disheveled face. Looking at the door in front of me. He remembered many years ago when he and silly Zhu were kneeling at this doorway, begging Daqing inside to come out and see them. But even so, Daqing still couldn't show his ruthlessness. Let them soak in the rain for a whole day. A day later, both of them had a slight fever, so they left here with a heart full of despair. I didn't expect to come back so many years later, begging for my father. There's no way, my brother has already been locked up and may even be shot. If we don't save him, he may not be able to see him in this lifetime. Although my brother is really a bit foolish, being fooled by Zhonghai like this, he always wants to be with Zhonghai like this. He bravely stepped forward and knocked on the door. Dong dong dong. There was a loud knocking on the door. Not long after, the door was opened. And from the other side of the door came a female voice. Who is it? He opened the door and was stunned when he saw the little girl in front of him. Who are you? Who are you looking for? He looked at Rainwater curiously and asked. When Rainwater saw the woman in front of her, she was actually not very familiar with her. May I ask if Daqing is here? Upon hearing these three words, the middle-aged woman was also stunned. Who are you? What are you looking for him for? At this moment, Rainwater also answered truthfully, I am his daughter, and I have something to do with him here. The middle-aged man was stunned when he heard the last words. What did you say? You said you were Daqing's daughter, I didn't hear you wrong, did I? You heard me right, I'm talking about Daqing's daughter. At this moment, Rainwater looked firmly at this middle-aged woman. The middle-aged woman felt very shocked. He walked forward and carefully examined Rainwater. He looks more and more alike. Are you his daughter in the courtyard? At this moment, another person came out of the room. Who are you talking to outside? You've been talking for so long. At this moment, Daqing walked out of the room. Ask loudly. I'm talking to your daughter. The middle-aged woman here also joked with a smile. She doesn't seem angry either. What nonsense are you talking about? I don't have a daughter. Daqing was very speechless. But just as he finished speaking, suddenly, Rainwater said loudly, Dad. His daughter's voice is clearly audible to Daqing. Everyone was stunned. Looking towards the sound, he couldn't believe his eyes as he looked at the rain in front of him. I didn't read it wrong, did I? Are you Rainwater? He Rainwater nodded and said, yes, I am your daughter. After so many years, although he Daqing abandoned them both in the beginning. But to be honest, in the heart of he Rainwater, he Daqing has always been his biological father. No matter how long we haven't seen each other, as soon as they see each other, they feel a particularly intimate feeling. He Daqing was completely bewildered, he couldn't imagine this fact. But at this moment, all the emotions in his heart suddenly burst out. He ran over and grabbed he Rainwater with just one grip. Daughter, what are you doing here? What's up? This guilty feeling in my heart actually lasted for a long time. It was also inevitable to abandon both of them at the beginning. It's not that I have a crush on other women and have abandoned my daughter and son. It's just some secrets that have to be revealed. Actually, the reason why I did this in the beginning. It was completely caused by Zhonghai and the deaf old lady. Because Zhonghai didn't have the qualifications to run for this position at all, and he Daqing was the best candidate. But after discussing with the deaf old lady in Zhonghai, he came up with a solution. They found out the secret of he Daqing's identity. So the two of them threatened he Daqing if he didn't leave this courtyard. He will reveal this secret, and not only will the position of this chef in the steel rolling mill not be guaranteed, but even their whole family may be looked down upon by others in this courtyard. Not to mention a good life. After much thought, he Daqing also reluctantly gave up his love, so he followed the widow Bai to Baoding. It's because of this exchange that led to the final outcome and consequences. If he had to choose for himself, he definitely wouldn't want to leave his son and daughter. After all, it's my own flesh and blood. For so many years, he has been feeling guilty and repenting about this matter. But there's no way, he can't go back. If I go back, my son's job and my daughter's education will be completely gone. It will be destroyed. He Rainwater also burst into tears at this moment, feeling the unprecedented sense of security in his father's chest. This is something he has never had before. Daughter, are you looking for me for anything? At this moment, he Daqing asked gently. I saw he Rainwater suddenly lift his head with tears in his eyes, looking at he Daqing very scared and saying, brother has been arrested in the cell now and is likely to be shot. You go back and take a look at him, see what methods can save him. Upon hearing this news, he Daqing's eyes were filled with anger. What the hell is going on? Why was my son suddenly arrested? Did he commit something? Later, he Rainwater carefully explained to him what had happened earlier. After listening, he Daqing felt a bit uncomfortable. Because stealing from the public is indeed a serious crime. I never expected my foolish son to look like this. He can do such a thing, isn't that stupid? The key is that the deaf old lady in Zhonghai taught their son to be like this, which made him the most angry. When I handed over the silly pillars to the two of them, I saw that they had a lot of life experience and wanted them to take care of their children. I didn't expect the two of them to be like this, and now they are directly locked up in the cell, and there is even a possibility of dying. Isn't this pulling a calf here? After listening, he Daqing clenched his fist and threw it on the table. The table fell apart with a loud bang. The white widow next to her also heard clearly. He looked at the angry he Daqing and said, your son has become like this. Why don't you go back and help me check what's still going on here? He Rainwater here was stunned for a moment. I thought the middle-aged woman in front of me would stop her father from leaving here. But I didn't expect this middle-aged woman to be urging here. The middle-aged woman, the white widow, looked at he Rainwater's puzzled expression and touched his face, saying with a smile, Rainwater, you. Do you think I won't let him go back? Of course I will. After all these years, we haven't had any children either. I treat you two as my own children. He said this from the bottom of his heart, and the emotion in his eyes could never be changed. He Rainwater seemed to feel this sincerity, and his heart was also very moved. He Daqing looked at Widow Bai and said, thank you for understanding me all these years. Now that my son has become like this, I must go back and seek justice for him. Would you like to come back to the courtyard with me? But Widow Bai shook her head and said, let's go handle this matter first. After you handle it, you can come back. I won't go there, and my home isn't there either. Daqing was obviously a bit disappointed. Then wait for me to come back, I will handle my son's affairs well, and I will come back. The White Widow nodded. He and Rainwater didn't bother much and then took the shuttle bus to rush to the 49 cities. Because the later the day, the more dangerous the silly pillar becomes. On the side of the courtyard house, the news of silly Zhu being shot suddenly spread. After all, he now has 2 felonies on him. One is stealing food from the public, and the other is that he falsely accused you of identity fraud. If these 2 crimes are imposed on him, he will be directly executed by firing squad. This silly pillar, I didn't expect to be shot at so young. It's really a pity. What are you regretting for him? He's not a good person in the courtyard. He relies on Zhonghai to bully him every day, and you've never been bullied by him. Although that's the way it is said, after all, it's a human life, and that's a bit different. You're really a bit of a virgin. Several people were arguing in the courtyard. Anyway, most people think it's a pity that silly Zhu has become like this, after all, he is so young. But there are still some people who make him feel like he deserves it. Most of these people have been bullied by silly pillars, and now inside Zhonghai's house. He and the deaf old lady are also in some difficulty. Because it has been so many years, they have cultivated silly pillar into this kind of person, and have put a lot of effort into it. If it goes to waste like this, they naturally feel very uncomfortable in their hearts. What should I do? Do you think Daqing will come back? Zhonghai felt a bit panicked here, especially when he remembered that his 5,000 yuan had been ruined for the sake of the silly pillar, which made his heart even more uncomfortable. I think Daqing should come back, according to his personality. The deaf old lady appeared very calm at this moment. What he is afraid of now is not that silly Zhu will be shot, but that his identity and background will be exposed. This is what he fears the most. I hope so, but when Daqing comes back, she doesn't have much ability to change anything, right? That's my idea. Zhonghai began to sigh. If we can't change it, we can't change it. But if we come back, having one more person will always be more effective. Does this have a significant impact on silly Zhu's current situation? But at this moment, Zhonghai is very worried. Because if Daqing comes back, these things he has done may be exposed. Especially after taking over the meals of silly pillar and Rainwater for oneself. If this matter is exposed, it will be over. Looking at Daqing's personality, he would definitely beat himself up. But there's no other way now. To be honest, I took their meal expenses back then, but now I have paid them back again. Actually, I didn't take much money myself. Compared to the current 5,000 yuan, it's just a drop in the bucket. After another period of running around, Daqing and Rainwater finally arrived at the door of the courtyard. I happened to see the third master Yan Bugue at the entrance of the courtyard. At first, Yan Fugue didn't immediately recognize Daqing, but asked Rainwater. Who is the person next to you? When Daqing saw Yan Bugue in front of him, he immediately recognized him. Xiaoyan, don't you know me anymore? I'm Daqing. Upon hearing these words, Yan Fugue was very surprised. Daqing, how did you come back? My son has become like this, shouldn't I come back yet? After saying these words, he didn't continue to pay attention to Yan Bugue. The two of them walked straight to the middle of the courtyard. Go straight to the door of Zhonghai's room. And he began to forcefully knock the door open. The knocking on the door was very loud, and people around rushed over one after another. Zhonghai, who was lying in bed, was also very angry when he heard the hurried knocking on the door. He opened the door and wanted to curse loudly. Yes, but I found that the person in front of me was very familiar. You, He Daqing, how did you come back? He Daqing looked at Zhonghai in front of him and slapped him without saying a word. 0 I was stunned to see everyone next to me. At this moment, Cheng also walked out of the room. Because it's really pointless not to watch this kind of excitement. I happened to see Zhonghai slapped in the face by someone else. This feeling is really satisfying. He Daqing, why are you hitting me? Zhonghai asked with gritted teeth. What are you doing beating you for? Don't you have any points in your heart? You have taught my son to be like this for so many years, and now it is said that he has been imprisoned and is about to be shot. That's why you said you wanted to help me take good care of my son. Do you think this should be fought? After hearing this, Zhonghai was very speechless, but there was no rebuttal. After all, now that silly Zhu has become like this, he himself is also to blame. But he still tried his best to sophistry. Your son is already a fool. I remind him every day not to steal things, not to steal things. He even wants to steal things from the government. For the sake of a woman, do you think I can always follow him? He is responsible for his own actions, what does it have to do with me? At this moment, Zhonghai is desperately trying to get rid of it. And upon hearing these words, He Daqing was also very angry. I slapped him again directly. This slap knocked out one of Zhonghai's front teeth. At this moment, Zhonghai is really angry. If it were like this, I would really have called the police over. Hee, do you dare to call the police? Look, I won't kill you. I'll ask you, why did my son become like this? When I left, he would transfer money here every month, but my daughter said, you haven't given him a penny, have you been taking all this money? Upon hearing He Daqing's question, Zhonghai couldn't say a word. Because this money was indeed swallowed by him alone. How's it going? There's nothing to say now, right? He Daqing pointed at his nose and cursed. And now my son has been locked up in prison and is about to be shot. I really can't imagine it developing like this. Aren't you an old man in a courtyard? Why isn't there anything now? Even my son can't see that he's the one who cares for you. Are you giving up like this? Zhonghai was criticized for having nothing to say. But when he heard this, he felt that there was an opportunity for him to shift the conflict. I saw him pat the dust on his body and then said very calmly, do you know why your son went in? It's obvious that someone else designed it. He was tricked by someone else, do you know? Upon hearing this, He Daqing was also stunned for a moment and said, what do you mean by that? Who dares to pit my son? At this moment, Zhonghai suddenly pointed at Cheng in the crowd and said, this is Cheng. He and your son are not the same person. That's why he designed to send your son to prison. He's still lying in prison. The culprit of everything is this Cheng. Whoever you want to vent on, you should find him instead of me here. He Daqing turned to look at Cheng, feeling very angry in his heart. At this point, he had already been overwhelmed by the anger. Directly charged towards Cheng. It is obvious that he is going to take action. Suddenly, everyone heard a bang. A person fell heavily on this underground spoon. Chapter 8. Deaf old lady disrupts her fame. He Daqing explodes big secrets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At this time, Cheng is not the same as before. When He Daqing rushed towards him, he kicked him away with just one kick. He Daqing fell heavily to the ground. The whole person is very confused. Because he knows that his fighting ability is still very strong. Almost no one can beat him. Just like this Zhonghai, he couldn't possibly beat himself. But at this moment, I fell heavily to the ground. Everyone was stunned. Before He Daqing could react, Zhonghai next to him stood up and accused, Cheng, what are you doing? You're beating someone for no reason. Upon hearing these words, Cheng really smiled and said, which I did you see me beating someone for no reason? He Daqing rushed back at me like this, and you said it was for no reason. Aren't you lying when you open your eyes? At this moment, Su Damao and Lu Haizhong beside him also agreed and said, don't embarrass yourself here. Even though it's this he Daqing who wants to beat Li Cheng, we can all see it clearly and clearly. Isn't that right? Zhonghai, why are you so unreasonable now? You don't even know right or wrong anymore. He Daqing rushed over like this. Can't Li Cheng resist? It's really funny. At this point, Zhonghai is no longer a master in the courtyard, his bangs are the only one. Now it's Zhonghai's turn to say something here. What he wants in his bangs is for Zhonghai to understand the situation. At this moment, other people in the courtyard also stepped forward and said, Zhonghai, why do you still want to be biased at this time? Zhonghai was criticized by so many people that he dared not say a word and retreated. And on this side, he Daqing also struggled to get up from the ground. He pointed at Li Cheng and said loudly, did you send my son, May 13th, to the prison? Li Cheng didn't refute either, just nodded and said calmly, your precious son stole public food, shouldn't he be caught? He didn't panic at all. Actually, the most responsible ones should be the deaf old lady and Zhonghai. Over the years, they haven't taught silly Zhu well, and even allowed him to steal things. Isn't this supposed to be responsible? You're really sorry to turn to me now. Upon hearing this, he Daqing felt that it was also very reasonable. The deaf old lady next to him walked out of the room because he had already heard this in the room. He Daqing had already returned from Baoding. And that's what they want. He Daqing will come to help, and they will get the silly pillar out. Let's see what we can do. He walked out and looked at He Daqing before whispering, Shao He, you have come back. Your precious son is almost shot. If you don't come back, he may not see your last side. Looking at the deaf old lady with white hair in front of him, He Daqing actually didn't give him any good face. How dare you say this to me? Why did my son become like this? You must give me an explanation. The deaf old man here has already figured it out for a long time. After all, it was they who wanted He Daqing to come back. Don't be influenced by others' comments. He was designed. As a chef in the steel rolling mill, how could he possibly steal food from the cafeteria? Don't he know that stealing food is illegal? He doesn't need to steal this thing either. His salary of over 30 yuan per person is not lacking. The whole process was designed by Li Cheng. If you don't believe it, go ask him. He Daqing didn't know who to trust at this moment. Deaf old lady, what you said is wrong. After all these years, you have called silly pillar this way. Shouldn't you be responsible? Do you have any evidence to say that I was designed and could have been caught by Director Yang himself, but now it's on to me? Deaf old lady, you're really shameless now. Being said this, as an ancestor, the deaf old lady naturally feels very uncomfortable in her heart. How did you talk to your ancestors? Apologize to them quickly. Zhonghai hurriedly urged beside him. What kind of ancestor doesn't have an ancestor? I don't want to treat others as my own ancestor. Zhonghai, if you want to be you, go ahead and don't blame me. Besides, isn't he just an ordinary old lady? Why do you want me to apologize? And what I'm saying is all the truth, it's just shameless. The deaf old lady was so angry that she gritted her teeth, even though there were not many teeth left on her mouth. At this moment, Li Cheng looked at He Daqing in front of him again and said, for so many years, you also know that your precious son has been serving every day. This is Zhonghai and the deaf old lady, and your precious son was also taught by him. When you were forced to leave this courtyard, it was also the two of them who worked together to make it. Have you forgotten? Upon hearing this, He Daqing was immediately stunned. Yes, these two beasts were the culprits who forced themselves out of the courtyard. The two of them said they must report their identities. If they don't leave this courtyard, they may lose their job as a kitchen assistant. For the sake of his own son and family, he had to leave this courtyard house, so he also chose this. But I didn't expect to leave the silly pillar to the two of them, teaching them what they look like now. Daqing was very angry at this moment, it's hard to believe. He turned around and looked at the deaf old lady in front of him, loudly questioning, "Why did you make my son look like this? And now my son has been locked up in a cell. I see why you two are indifferent here. Shouldn't you save him? More importantly, why did you two take away the food expenses I gave my son back then? What kind of peace of mind are you? You two really don't keep your promise at all. I promised you both to leave this courtyard house, and I've been doing it for so many years. I've never come back, but now, you've sent my son to jail. Let me come back now to wipe this asshole. You're really sorry. Don't think I don't know, the rain was brought over by you two. Today, you two must give me an explanation." Daqing's voice grew louder and louder, and everyone heard it clearly here. Everyone has already heard a news. That was when Daqing left this courtyard house, he was forced to leave helplessly. And there seems to be some kind of transaction between him and the deaf old lady. At this moment, the onlookers were also discussing, and everyone's eyes were fixed on the deaf old lady in front of them. Isn't that right? There's such a thing. Didn't Daqing just take a liking to someone else's white widow and leave this courtyard? Didn't he just abandon his son and daughter for the sake of a widow? According to their accounts, is there something fishy about this matter? There must be some skills, haven't you heard about it? It seems that there is a problem with Daqing's identity, but we don't know exactly what it is. The deaf old lady looked at Daqing in front of her and was also very speechless. Why did she turn her head to target herself again? Calling you back now is for your help, not for you to argue here, the deaf old lady said loudly. But at this moment, Daqing's emotions for decades this year suddenly erupted. He rushed straight to the deaf old lady, grabbed his clothes, and loudly questioned him, "How did you teach my son? How could it be like this?" Seeing Daqing like this, the deaf old lady here didn't give him any face either. "Your precious son is really silly. No wonder you gave him a silly name. He has been making such a fuss in this courtyard for so many years, and we have been wiping his butt. If it weren't for the two of us taking care of him, he would have gone to jail long ago. How could you be shouting at me here? The baby son you gave birth to is really useless and useless. Last time, we had to compensate for our coffin because of something. We just didn't want him to get into trouble, so we've been suffering so much. Do you think we want silly Zhu to go into the cell? I just reminded him not to mess with things a few days ago, but the day after, he actually stole things from the public house. Do you think your son can be saved? There's no way he can be saved. To be honest, he hasn't been saved at all. What kind of idiot? It's really a waste of all my years, cultivating such a trash." Although Daqing and his son have not seen each other for so many years, to be honest, blood is thicker than water. He can say his own son is foolish, but others cannot. Upon hearing this, Daqing exposed that he had cursed his son as trash. So he slapped the deaf old lady in the face, and she stumbled back a few steps before stopping. Seeing this situation, Zhonghai quickly went up and helped her. "What are you doing?" Zhonghai asked loudly. "He said that to my son, what are you saying I'm doing?" "I tell you, only I can say he's a fool, neither of you can. Do you think I'm willing to let my son serve you two old and immortal creatures, instead of forcing me out of the courtyard? I've been enjoying the joy of family with my son and daughter for a long time. Will I still suffer from this kind of separation?" The deaf old lady was slapped and confused, and Daqing's strength was very strong. I never expected to call Daqing back and slap myself directly. It was really like lifting a stone and hitting my own foot. Daqing was like a crazy dog at this moment, catching people and wanting to take a bite. At first, I tried to bite Cheng but was unsuccessful. Later on, he turned his head and looked at the deaf old lady, who couldn't beat him at all, and that was a success. Although Zhonghai is extremely frustrated, he is very powerless because he cannot defeat Daqing in front of him. If you're tampering here, I'll call the police over. But when Daqing heard Zhonghai's words, he was not afraid at all. If you have the ability, go and call the police over. I want to expose all the dirty things you've done before. Upon hearing these words, the deaf old lady and Zhonghai were a bit panicked. Because they truly know that Daqing knows many of his secrets. The reason why Daqing was forced out of this quadrangle was because of this, and Daqing truly knew too much. They didn't think much about rescuing silly Zhu in a hurry. After all, this elderly care is the main focus at this time. Daqing called you back today to save your precious son. Don't waste your time here, okay? Zhonghai had no choice but to say so. But Daqing doesn't even eat his tricks. For so many years, he has been unable to sleep at night because of the mischief caused by Daqing and the deaf old lady. My son has been locked up now, and some things cannot be changed at all, but today I have to give you both a total account. Daqing rolled up his sleeves and walked up to the deaf old lady and the two of them, startling them both. What exactly do you want to do? Zhonghai shouted loudly at this moment. What do I want to do? Don't you have any points in mind? Daqing said with a serious expression on his face. He suddenly lifted the deaf old lady with one hand. He didn't even consider the identity of the martyr's family. The deaf old lady struggled to break free there, but found that she couldn't break free at all. I saw Daqing speaking to the crowd in the courtyard. Everyone here has many of my old friends. Everyone should know my character, and I have a straightforward and cheerful heart. Maybe everyone thought that when I left here before, it was because a widow had taken me away. But I'm telling you, it's not like this at all. How could I have cruelly left my son and daughter behind? It's impossible, they two beasts forced me away. Speaking of which. He gritted his teeth and looked at Zhonghai and the deaf old lady. The emotions of over a decade suddenly erupted. Do you want to tell me about your identity fraud? Said the deaf old lady here loudly. But at this moment, Daqing seemed to have not heard it. He had not even taken this sentence to heart. For so many years, this identity fraud has been weighing on my mind. I've really had enough of it. Just say it out loud. So what if you put me in jail? It's okay. I'm willing to take on this responsibility. But today I'm going to expose what you two have done. Hey everyone, these two people are really not good people. Don't be fooled by the surface of the two of them. When I was in this courtyard, I was supposed to be elected as the first uncle, but these two people threatened me by falsifying my identity for the sake of such a little power. At first, I thought that my own son would have a serious job in the future 3.5, so I agreed to their request, but my heart was also very painful. After Baoding, I would remit money here every month, but to my surprise, Zhonghai embezzled my money directly. It's really disgusting, really disgusting. Only when everyone heard this did they suddenly realize. Originally, Daqing, who had left the courtyard before, still had so many secrets. It has to be said that what this deaf old lady Zhonghai did was really not authentic. At this moment, Cheng and Su Dumao were watching from the side and it was very exciting. It was really true that there was finally someone who could take care of both of them. And it's hard to say a word about Zhonghai and the deaf old lady. If your identity fraud is revealed, you will have to go to jail. Do you still want to continue talking here? The deaf old lady continued to threaten here. But Daqing doesn't care at all. Just squat in the cell, my son is about to be shot. I want to go to the cell and see if he's pretty good. I just changed my identity as a hired farmer to a poor farmer. If you want to say so, then I'll say it in advance. Daqing thought everyone would be very shocked when he heard this. But unexpectedly, everyone seemed to have known this news in advance and had no feeling at all. Daqing, we have already known this news. Our Li clerk has already found it out in the neighborhood committee. Lu Haizhong beside us said lightly. A few days ago, it was this identity fraud that led to the aggravation of this foolish pillar's crime. At this point, Zhonghai continued, it was because of your identity fraud that your precious son was directly shot. Originally, it wasn't as serious as that. He shifted all the responsibility onto this Daqing. Chapter 8. Surprise. The deputy director of the neighborhood committee surprisingly has such power. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After hearing this news, Daqing was also somewhat surprised. Because he was particularly secretive when he forged this thing back then. Except for people like Zhonghai, almost no one else knows. How could Li Cheng in front of me possibly be found out? Seeing Daqing's surprised expression, Li Cheng looked at him and answered his doubts very calmly. It was because Jia Zhang said that Jia Zhang also saw you falsifying there, that's why I found out. At this moment, including Zhonghai River and Daqing, they all suddenly realized. It turns out that this inner ghost is actually this Jia Zhang family. Where is Jia Zhang now? He said this thing out loud, it's really lightning strikes. Daqing gritted his teeth. He has already been sent to the prison and is half disabled. If you want to see him, why don't you go see him in prison? Upon hearing this, Daqing was stunned again. I have been walking for so many years, how come so many things have happened? 2 people in a courtyard have already been imprisoned. It's really a peculiar courtyard house. Did my son not betray and be shot at first, but rather because he had fabricated his identity, which is why he was even more guilty? Daqing continued to inquire here. Of course, there is this reason. Don't you know that identity fraud is a very serious political event? When you first cheated, you should have thought about the consequences. Don't hold any lucky mentality and say that this news can't be found. I tell you that everything can be found. Does Daqing feel hopeless? I didn't expect my precious son to be caught and sentenced so severely, which is also related to myself. The reason why he cheated in the beginning was for their good, but now it has actually harmed them. At this moment, Daqing suddenly looked at Li Cheng and asked, did you really design to send my son to the prison? Seeing Daqing's sudden question, Li Cheng's answer was very plain. I sent him in, after all, no one in this courtyard teaches him to be a good person, so only I can teach him well. When I was cooking in the cafeteria, I actually tore up my meal tickets in front of everyone. Moreover, when I was in this courtyard, this foolish pillar would also do evil deeds for 12 Fei, without any regard for others, especially Su Damao who kicked him out of infertility. I should give him a good education, and I think it's also appropriate. What do you think? Daqing. At this moment, Daqing's face was also filled with anger. Anyway, you are all neighbors. You don't need to do such a great job, right? Although he's a neighbor, I can't compliment him on this kind of relationship. Don't you forget that when silly Zhu bullied my family, he didn't show any mercy. When he kicked Su Damao, he didn't show any mercy. When he bullied others, he didn't show any mercy from his subordinates. Can we blame him for this? He can only blame himself for not educating him well. Li Cheng looked coldly at Daqing, not afraid at all of the middle-aged man in front of him. Because there is no need for this, as a clerk of the neighborhood committee, I am now the deputy director. This kind of thing in the courtyard itself is now under my own management. That is to say, I am the boss in this courtyard, and it is useless who comes. At this point, while speaking here, suddenly, several police officers emerged from the entrance of the courtyard. Everyone was stunned for a moment, because many people didn't even see anyone go and called the police over. Seeing the police approaching, Zhonghai quickly welcomed them and said, "This is the police comrade. Daqing is beating someone here, and both of us were beaten by him. And the police comrade is the one who faked his identity. You should take him away quickly." Hear this. The 2 police officers were very excited. Because they know that if they catch such a person, they may make a contribution. At this moment, Cheng walked over and looked at the two of them in a leadership tone, saying, "Xiao Wang, Xiao Chen, why are you here?" At this moment, the two police officers looked at Cheng and immediately fell a chicken. Then the two of them respectfully said, "Director Li, it was Zhonghai who went to ask someone else to call us over, claiming that someone here was falsifying their identity and fighting, so we came over." Everyone was a bit confused when they heard what these two police officers were saying. "Director Li, what does Director Li mean? Has Cheng in front of me been promoted to director?" There is only one possibility, otherwise these two police officers would not be respectful to him. At this moment, the bangs next to him also took a cold breath. Unexpectedly, this little Li went from being a clerk to becoming a deputy director in just a few days. It's simply unimaginable. Cheng nodded as he looked at the two police officers and said in a very serious tone, "This matter is indeed true. A few days ago, our neighborhood committee also discovered that the He family had fabricated their identities. However, Daqing did not come back, so he was not taken away. Since you came today, you can take Daqing away." The two police officers nodded excitedly. Zhonghai here is also very proud, while Daqing is very uncomfortable. Because he hasn't sat down in this courtyard to drink a glass of water yet. At this moment, Rainwater walked over. Crying, he said, "Brother Li, please don't do this. My dad didn't make any mistakes, why take him away?" Looking at the crying Rainwater in front of him, Cheng simply said very plainly, "Your father has broken the law, so being taken away is in accordance with legal procedures. If you want to blame him, you can only blame himself. It's no use telling me, and I can't break the law." At this moment, two police officers took out silver bracelets and wanted to put them on Daqing's body. But Daqing pushed the two police officers away and shouted loudly, "You two have no right to arrest me here. I actually don't have a good impression of Daqing and Cheng, because he wants to hit himself indiscriminately. If it weren't for his own abilities, he would have knocked him down long ago. Seeing him defying the law enforcement of the police. So he said very seriously and coldly, "You are disobeying the law enforcement of the police. If you continue like this, it will really add insult to injury. What I see now is for the sake of the neighbors. I will forgive you this time, don't struggle anymore." Daqing was completely confused. Didn't I just fake my identity? Didn't I just turn poor farmers into hired ones? As for this. Faced with Daqing's question. At this point, Cheng gave his explanation. "No matter what, no matter how you fabricated it, the fact is that you have already fabricated it. Don't argue about anything here anymore. If you really disobey again, then I will really send you father and son to the west together." Cheng's words really scared Daqing. "I'll tell you, Daqing. Your son was sent in by Cheng, and now you're also going to be sent in by him. Who told you not to listen to us?" Zhonghai beside him proudly said. But at this moment, Daqing looked indifferent. "When I came back from Baoding, I knew I would be arrested. After all, the incident of my identity fraud has already spread and everyone knows about it. I knew about it before I came. I also know that since I have already falsified my identity, I definitely can't get rid of some responsibility." So he suddenly walked up to Cheng and whispered, "I want to beat these two beasts again." Cheng was momentarily stunned upon hearing these words, who would smile and nod in agreement. And signal two police officers not to arrest them for now. At this moment, Daqing deliberately broke free from the hands of two police officers. He ran straight towards Zhonghai and the deaf old lady. After all, Daqing at this time was a middle-aged man of great vigor and vitality. At the beginning of the run, it's like a tiger with a tiger's back and a bear's waist. Not long after, they ran in front of Zhonghai and the others. Zhonghai and his team didn't even react and felt a burst of pain in their stomachs. And the deaf old lady here is no exception. When they realized it, they found themselves lying on the ground. And standing in front of them was this Daqing. I saw Daqing pointing at the noses of the two of them and scolding him, "You two beasts have caused me to stay outside for so many years. I didn't expect you to harm my son like this, or let him care for you and send him to prison. I have to report this bad breath." After saying these words, he slapped the two people again. "You two beasts, take care of yourself." The people in the courtyard saw this scene. Most people feel very satisfied in their hearts. Cool, it's really amazing. For so many years, this emotion has been suppressed in their hearts. This so-called ancestor Ni Zhonghai have been suppressing them all along. I didn't expect that Daqing would immediately vent their emotions. No one went to help them up. Because everyone feels it's unnecessary. After finishing the fight, Daqing took the initiative to walk up to the police and extended his hands. "Now you can handcuff me." Cheng nodded and gestured, and the two police officers took out silver bracelets and handcuffed them onto his hands. There was no resistance throughout the entire process. Upon seeing this scene, Rainwater cried and said, "Oh, what's going on here? Why are you also caught? You and my brother were caught, so what should I do?" I saw Daqing lower his head and touch Rainwater's head to comfort him, saying, "Don't worry, I'm just going to see my precious son in the cell. There's nothing wrong with my daughter, so you stay outside and enjoy yourself." After saying these words, Daqing turned around and left the courtyard with these two police comrades. At this moment, the deaf old lady was lying on the ground, groaning and groaning. His body is still very good, and the reason he relies on a cane is to pretend to be seen by others. In this case, others can't help but show a hint of sympathy. But at this moment, she was kicked by Daqing and felt that the bones on her leg had already cracked. At this moment, he was already howling in pain here. Zhonghai, come and take a look at me quickly. My legs seem to be unable to move." At this moment, Zhonghai, although also very painful all over. But when he heard the cries of his ancestors, he quickly ran over. "What's going on? Is there something wrong with the legs?" Zhonghai asked with concern. The deaf old lady here gritted her teeth and nodded, "My leg hurts so much, it seems to have a bone fracture. Can you take me to the hospital?" "Is that right? I have to kill him, Daqing, who killed 1,000 knives." The deaf old lady didn't care about the people in the courtyard anymore, so the two of them followed an old man and ran towards the hospital. Watching the two of them leave behind, everyone also let out a long sigh of relief. I felt the pent-up anger in my heart for more than a decade suddenly burst out, and my whole body was very clear. These two people are really wicked and have a wicked reputation. Daqing's actions really stunned everyone. Cheng muttered to himself and smiled as he returned to the room. The controversy surrounding the courtyard house caused by Daqing's return has temporarily come to an end. And at this time, in the hospital, the deaf old lady felt very painful lying on the hospital bed. Daqing, the killer of the 1,000 knives, really doesn't know the severity. He just kicked your leg off. Zhonghai gritted his teeth beside him. The deaf old lady couldn't say a single word. "Wait for a moment to ease up." He clenched his fist and said fiercely, "Daqing, if he's not shot, then I swear I won't be a human." And this Cheng, it's obvious that he deliberately let Daqing come and attack us. Otherwise, the police would definitely stop us. But at that time, the police stood motionless beside us, as if they were being signaled by someone else. Zhonghai also nodded, and he fully agreed with this. At this point, he had already regarded Cheng as his natural enemy. I didn't expect this person who killed thousands of dollars to be replaced by the deputy director of the neighborhood committee in just a few days. In his eyes, we were just lambs with us. We can't even fight him now, if we come openly. Then let's not be overt. We must take advantage of his mother and sister. I remember his sister is still in junior high school here, right? Then you can contact some street thugs and let them kidnap her. Upon hearing this suggestion, Zhonghai nodded in agreement without hesitation. The current public security situation is indeed very chaotic. It is also very normal to be abducted by these thugs. Such incidents often occur. We need to plan this matter carefully. Cheng really wants to kill us, so we don't need to be polite to him. If Daqing hits us like this and his identity is fake, he will definitely not be able to get out of prison for a while. Dealing with such people in prison is also very easy. Thinking of this, the two of them relaxed their expressions for a moment. After all, I was beaten up for no reason today and I feel very unhappy. You must be cautious when it comes to finding a little thug. Cheng will definitely notice this, so you must do it secretly. The deaf old lady reminded her beside her at this moment. Don't worry, I'm not doing this kind of thing for the first time. I've done it a few times before, have you forgotten? That old Huang is an old hand. Zhonghai patted his chest. After hearing this, the deaf old lady was also very happy. I still believe in you in this regard. You have also abducted a few girls before, which I remember very clearly. However, you must be cautious this time. Be careful. Cheng, who killed thousands of dollars, is not easy to deal with. After all, he is now the deputy director of the neighborhood committee. Zhonghai shook his head disdainfully and said, don't worry, it's useless even if the heavenly king Laozi comes. Besides, I would like to directly tie up Cheng. This is really a complete solution. But this idea was directly rejected by the deaf old lady. Don't do this, he is after all the deputy director of the street office. If you tie him up, the government will definitely attach great importance to it. When the time comes, you will have to dig out the ground 3 feet away, and you won't be able to run anywhere. Don't worry, I'm just joking. Zhonghai explained, suddenly feeling a pain in his stomach. Daqing, this killer with 1,000 knives is so heavy. 2 people are conspiring here. At this time, Daqing was also imprisoned in a cell, and happened to be locked at home with the 2 of them, Silly Zhu and Jia Zhang. Silly Zhu was originally sitting on the ground motionless, feeling very depressed, when suddenly he heard the sound of the prison door. He looked up and saw why this person was so familiar. But he hasn't reacted yet. A slap had already come over. Chapter 9. Daqing beats Silly Zhu collapses. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Silly Zhu was completely bewildered, even Jia and Zhang were also bewildered. Why did you hit me? Silly Zhu gritted his teeth and looked at the person in front of him. As it was backlighting, he had not even seen it clearly. What's the point? I'm your father. Daqing quickly walked over, and it was only then that Silly Zhu could see the face of the man in front of him clearly. He was stunned and opened his chin, unable to close at all. Are you? He asked hesitantly. At this moment, Jia Zhang, who was next to him, said in confusion, Are you Daqing? Daqing was also stunned when he saw Jia Zhang sitting in a wheelchair. How did you become like this? Jia Pafu. Jia Zhang was very speechless, but he was used to it. Daqing called himself this title. Don't ask me, I've become like this. I want to ask you why you're here. Jia Zhang retorted. Why am I here? Is it because of your stinky mouth? You had already sworn to heaven that you wouldn't reveal our identity, but I didn't expect you to turn around and reveal it. You're really sorry. Jia Zhang truly realized upon hearing this. Oh, it turns out it's because of this matter. You've already falsified your identity. I'm just saying it for now, it's not that big of a deal. You also need to understand me. If I didn't reveal my disabled identity, I might starve to death in this cell. After searching for it, Li showed great understanding and gave me some delicious food. Seeing his very indifferent expression, Daqing was actually very angry in his heart. But he did not continue the beating because he felt that it was no longer necessary. I saw that he didn't pay any attention to Jia Zhang, but instead looked at the silly pillar next to him. At this moment, Silly Zhu opened his mouth wide and rubbed his eyes, making it hard to believe. What kind of Cheng are you really? Don't you even know me? Daqing continued to pat his head. What lousy, you're not my lousy at all. My lousy has already died in Baoding. Silly Zhu gritted his teeth and said. At this moment, the emotion that had been accumulating in his heart for over a decade suddenly erupted. My so-called father abandoned their two siblings. Even though they were kneeling at the door of Baoding, he didn't open the door to pick himself up. That kind of desperate mood makes Silly Zhu unforgettable for life. It is basically impossible for him to recognize Daqing as his biological father again at this moment. Seeing his son like this, Daqing felt helpless in his heart. Do you just hate me so much? Shouldn't I hate you? You have done such behavior, shouldn't I hate you? Silly Zhu looked at Daqing and said desperately. At this moment, Daqing let out a sigh. I did apologize to you for what happened back then, but I have other hidden secrets. I guessed you would say that. Don't talk to me about these useless things. I'll tell you, you're not my dad is already dead. Silly Zhu said in a hoarse voice, unable to accept the fact in front of him. At this moment, Daqing did not hit him either. But suddenly sat next to me for a while. When you see me like this, I'm also locked up. Do you know why I came? Because your sister went to Baoding to find me and said you were locked up in a cell and might have been shot. So I just wanted to come over and take a look, see if there's any way I can save you from getting out. But I didn't expect that after listening to your behavior, I could hardly believe that you had made such a foolish act of stealing public food. What exactly is going on in your mind? Don't you know that stealing public food is illegal? Silly Zhu doesn't even want to talk to Daqing. I can do whatever I want, it's up to you to manage it. At this moment, Silly Zhu still misunderstood Daqing here. I'm telling you not to talk to me about this yet. You're nothing to me, you don't have the right to interfere with me here. Silly Zhu was also very angry. How have they been through these past decade or so? Silly Zhu knew in his heart that the rain in the beginning was still small, and it was all brought up by him. At that time, he never imagined that his biological father would abandon them and leave here just for a widow. It's simply unbelievable. Daqing knew he had misunderstood him again, so he sat down and sighed. Do you think I left the courtyard only because I was abducted by a widow? Upon hearing this, Silly Zhu raised his head and asked in reverse, isn't it? Daqing chuckled and said, you are my son, don't you understand my character? Have I been this kind of person for so many years? Am I the kind of person who abandoned you? There is actually another hidden truth behind it. But Silly Zhu Yiri doesn't believe it. I've been making up and down here again, it's really interesting. It's nothing else, just keep your mouth shut for me. Just then, Jia Zhang suddenly coughed next to her. Looking at the silly pillar in front of him, he sneered and said, no wonder you're being silly. Others call you silly pillar. It turns out you can't distinguish between good and bad people in the courtyard. Do you think Zhonghai and the deaf old lady are doing it for your own good? When Daqing was forced out of the courtyard, I knew about this matter, even though I didn't care about anything because Daqing didn't mean much to me either. Silly Zhu was also stunned when he heard this and said, what exactly do you mean by this sentence? You don't even know that what I'm saying is so obvious. It's really like my mind is filled with paste, right? What I mean is that when Daqing left the courtyard, it was not for the sake of a widow at all. It was this conspiracy between Zhonghai and the deaf old lady that forced Daqing away. I knew about this at the beginning, and it was because of your family's identity fraud. Daqing didn't want to implicate your siblings, so he left here alone, while you were still clamoring here. It's really ridiculous. Daqing did not expect that the Jia Zhang family in front of him would actually speak his own words. Don't deceive me here. How could Zhonghai, the deaf old lady, and the two of them treat me like biological children all along? How could they do such a dirty thing? And there's no need for it at all. As soon as he finished speaking, Daqing beside him felt a bit angry. A biological child. If it were a biological child, he would have taught you to be like this, unable to leave your cell now, and may even be shot. They forced me out just to make you care for them, but I thought they would educate you well, but their way of education is really rubbish. They have directly educated you into a sneaky person. Now you are locked in a cell, and it is very serious, and you may be sentenced to death. Silly Zhu was completely stunned, he couldn't believe what he had heard. He stood there completely bewildered, unsure of who he should believe. Daqing sighed and said, I didn't tell you this fact back then, just because I was afraid you would also be affected. You also know that our Tan family's cuisine is not a third-generation poor farmer. We are third-generation hired farmers, and we couldn't work in the steel rolling mill with this identity. It was because I tampered with it that I entered the steel rolling mill. In order not to implicate you, and to find work and study in the future, I had to leave here, which is why I left here with the widow later. At this moment, the entire building suddenly fell silent. Silly Zhu's entire breathing also became very rapid. Are all of what you said true? He asked again. Daqing nodded and agreed, all of this is true. Upon hearing these words, Silly Zhu suddenly fell to his knees with a loud bang. Then tears flowed between the two eyes. For so many years, he has never left a word, even if he is locked up here, he has never left a word. But the emotions that have accumulated in his heart for over a decade, he can't hold back. So tears streamed down my face. Daqing felt very uncomfortable seeing him like this, because no matter how foolish he was, in short, he was his own biological son. Seeing this scene, he walked up and helped Silly Pillar up. I was wrong, all of this is really me. Suddenly, Silly Zhu repented here. Not long after, the emotions of a few people also calmed down. But what Daqing needs to figure out now is why Silly Zhu suddenly went to steal things from the public house. By the way, son, why did you do this behavior? Don't you know that cutting corners is illegal? It's okay for you to take some leftover materials. Why did you take fresh chicken? This is prepared for the leader. Can the leader not be angry if they see it? Faced with such questioning, Daqing's gaze was clearly a bit evasive. But there are only these two people here. After evading for a while, Daqing said, it's Qin Jie from our yard who asked me to go and get it. His family situation is particularly poor, so I want to help him. Upon hearing this, Jia Zhang's emotions became somewhat excited. I didn't expect you, little rabbit Huizi, to approach my daughter in law every day while I was locked up in prison. Don't think I don't know what you're up to. You're just like your father, a widow lover. If I had gone out, I would never have allowed this to happen. Jia Zhang gritted his teeth in anger. Thinking of his daughter in law Qin Huairu, I feel very uncomfortable in my heart. I have been locked up here for so many days, and no one is looking at me. Don't they know that they have become disabled now? They already knew. It's obvious that this Qin Huairu doesn't even want to see this. Hurry up and shut your mouth for me. Do you think you still have a chance to go out? How could you, someone who practices feudal superstition, get out? Silly Zhu sneered on the side. Upon hearing these words, Daqing was also very angry and slapped Jia Zhang's face. Don't be speechless here, how are you? Who is a widow enthusiast, please explain to me clearly. You are. Jia Zhang covered her face and said loudly, although you were forced to leave, don't you admit that you are interested in this white widow? You already like this white widow. It's not that both of you, father and son, are widows' lovers. It's really disgusting. Jia Zhang endured the pain and looked at the two of them with sharp eyes. To be honest, this sentence has already touched on his sore spot. After all, I was indeed forced to leave at first, and I also liked this white widow. Otherwise, it would not have been possible to live with this widow for so many years. The two of them live quite well in Baoding. I used to miss my two children sometimes, but widow Bai took care of Daqing very well. Daqing didn't continue speaking, just sat down and sighed. He didn't argue about this matter anymore, and there was no need to argue. Jia Zhang, do you think you can still get out? I've heard that you may be sentenced to life imprisonment, and you can never get out. As a widow, Qin Huairu's life with so many children on his own is certainly very difficult. Do you want him to guard your Jia family like a jade, take care of your Jia family every day? Taking care of so many people every day is also a bit difficult for others. Recognize this reality, you will never get out. And I heard that your precious grandson has also been locked up in the juvenile detention center and hasn't come out yet. I heard something happened in the juvenile detention center, but I don't know exactly what happened. In front of him, Jia Zhang had no emotions at all. But suddenly I heard something happen to my precious grandson. He immediately came to his senses. What are you saying? How could my grandson have had an accident? What exactly happened to him? He pushed the wheelchair up to Daqing and asked loudly. Seeing his excitement, Daqing smiled and said, I don't know exactly what happened. It's just that when I entered the courtyard, someone said, you have a grandson, and this grandson is in the juvenile detention center. It seems like something's happening now. Oh my, I advise you not to worry so much. You can't even care about yourself and worry about others. What happened to your grandson has nothing to do with you now. You'll be sentenced to life imprisonment. Why do you want to do this? But Jia Zhang suddenly went crazy and crashed into the door of this cell, causing a loud noise. The police officer who heard this sound immediately ran over. Seeing the police, Jia Zhang immediately shouted, what's going on with me now? I'm going to see my grandson, I'm going to see my grandson. The police saw him go crazy. Immediately, Zhao blocked his mouth with paper and said, be quiet here, you know. But even if it was blocked and his hands were tied up, he still howled there. At that time, I couldn't make a sound anymore. The police don't care what your precious grandson looks like. Jia Zhang felt very hopeless all over. Don't struggle like this, can't you just stay here? You can't help your precious grandson even if you go out now. Besides, there's another mother outside, Qin Huairu, here. Why are you worrying so much? Due to being tied to the mouth by paper. Jia Zhang couldn't say a word. And the two of Daqing and Silly Zhu did not take care of it, because it was done by the police, and there was no need to take care of it by themselves. So, the Jia Zhang family stopped shouting, and after a while, they stopped shouting. On the other side, Daqing and Silly Zhu were discussing ways to leave here. But there is no good way to negotiate, after all, they have committed such a serious crime. What should we do? Do we really want to stay here for a lifetime? Do I really want to be shot? The more he saw death, the more scared Silly Zhu's heart became. There's still a way, don't worry, there's only one person in the entire courtyard who can save the two of us now. Silly Zhu was stunned and said, who would save us? Who has the ability? I observed the people in the courtyard and found that Cheng was the most capable. If I remember correctly, it should be the son of Siheyuan, also known as Li Yong's son, isn't that wrong? Silly Zhu nodded and said, what you said is indeed true, but there is a big conflict between Cheng and me. He was on the scene when I was arrested, and he has been preventing the deaf old lady and Zhonghai from rescuing me. How could he possibly help me? Daqing smiled slightly and said, don't worry, I know a secret. I know how his father died. As long as I know this, we can go out.